Hopefully that will get somebody's attention. Hello, and good evening, and welcome all of you to the September 15th, 2008 meeting of the Los Gatos Town Council, Parking Authority, and Redevelopment Agency. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Councilmember Steve Glickman.
Here.
Councilmember Diane McNutt.
Here.
Councilmember Joe Przinsky.
Here.
Vice Mayor Mike Wasserman.
Here.
Mayor and Chair Barbara Spector.
Here. Now, I'm going to be making this announcement several times, but hopefully you'll all get it the first time round. If you're here this evening to speak on any item on our agenda, any item, please fill out and submit this speaker card to the clerks over here. Please do that as soon as possible, and definitely submit your speaker card before we begin our public hearings. So thank you. I'm going to manage this meeting as best I can, but I'm going to need your cooperation, so please submit the speaker cards. All right, now we get to some really interesting, fun stuff. The Pledge of Allegiance led by future leaders. Tonight's future pledge leaders are local athletes who represented Los Gatos in the 42nd International Children's Games in San Francisco in July. I got to interface with Ed San Juan back there in organizing this event. Thank you, Ed. And so now what I'm going to do, first of all, before I tell you about these amazing women, I'm going to announce them, have them all come up here, and then I will tell you about them and embarrass them right in front of you all. So let's start with Melissa Hang, Fisher Middle School. Kyle Palacio, Hyde Middle School. Paige Kettenberg, Union Middle School. Gabrielle Wetson, Burnell Middle School. Emily San Juan, Fisher Middle School. Tori Walker, Fisher Middle School. Kyle Van Richter, the King's Academy. Kayla Knapp, Fisher Middle School. And unable to be with us is Stephanie Probst of St. Martin of Tours. So now that they're all up here, let me tell you what they did. As I said, these women represented us in the 42nd International Children's Games in San Francisco in July. Founded in 1968, the Games are designed to promote international peace and friendship through athletics. This year, more than 1,200 children from 40 cities spanning the Earth's 6 continents participated in track and field, basketball, swimming, table tennis, volleyball, soccer, and tennis events. Los Gatos was one of those cities. And I have to tell you, when Ed sent me the email on this and I saw the list of the cities, and I don't remember what they all were, but it was like Beijing, Bangkok, London, Los Gatos. I mean, it was just so cool. With us here tonight are members of the Los Gatos girls soccer team who won a bronze medal and earned wins over Kitchener, Ontario, Canada, Montego Bay, Jamaica, and Rochester, New York. Their 2 losses were to Cork, Ireland, and San Mateo, which placed first in the girls' competition. Los Gatos was also represented by a track team, which took home 3 gold medals, and we have one of the track members here. Would you please raise your hand? Who has her gold medal around her neck. As a result of Los Gatos' victory, both teams have been invited to the annual competition from this point forward. These women will now be leading us in the Pledge of Allegiance, so please stand and face the flag. To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Let's give them all a round of applause. Now, before you leave, I'm going to ask each of you to start over here with Mr. Glickman. Shake each of the council people's hands so we can all meet you one-on-one. Each of the women has been presented with the town pin that the council members wear. All right, now before we get to the closed session report, I will once again ask anyone who plans on speaking on any item on our agenda to please submit a speaker card to the clerks over here to your right, my left. Closed session report.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. No report tonight. Council did not meet in closed session.
Thank you. I have the privilege and honor this evening to present some very special commendations. As you may know, the town of Los Gatos puts on a concert series every summer called Music in the Park. This year it was our 20th anniversary, and the organization, the Arts Commission, had tribute bands each week, and they were a phenomenal success. So at this point, I'm going to walk down to the table, and I'm going to ask all members of the Arts Commission who is here present to join me up there, please. I have the pleasure of joining these wonderful people almost every Sunday throughout the summer, as have many of the folks here on the council. But I'm now going to introduce them one by one. As they read their name, I would ask him or her to raise his hand. After I've introduced all of them, I would ask that we give them a round of applause. I'm going to begin with Penelope O'Neill, Chair of the Arts Commission; Valerie Hopkins, Chair of the Music in the Park Committee; Mary Ann Hamilton; Tricia Capri; Jonathan Knowles; Mary Curtis; Jade Bradbury; David Stonecipher; and Mika Storrs. Let's give them a round of applause, please. She said the town must like rock and roll. I think we do. Now, they're each going to receive a commendation, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to read to you the substance of Penelope's, all right? And then I will hand each of the members their commendation, and if any one of them wishes to have a brief comment, given the number of you are here in our audience, that would be cool also. Whereas the Town of Los Gatos Arts Commission coordinates the production of the annual Music in the Park concert series so that residents may gather in Los Gatos throughout the summer to celebrate a common social and cultural experience through music. And whereas Music in the Park celebrated its 20th anniversary this summer with a tremendously popular entertainment schedule, which included rock and roll tribute bands that honored legends such as Steely Dan, Fleetwood Mac, and the Beatles. And whereas Penelope O'Neill served the town of Los Gatos on the town's highly successful 2008 Music in the Park Summer Concert Series, and whereas Patricia O'Neill unselfishly contributed her time, energies, and capabilities to the Music in the Park program, and whereas the Town Council feels that such outstanding public service deserves special recognition, now therefore the Town Council of the Town of Los Gatos does hereby render with special appreciation a commendation to Penelope O'Neill for dedicated public service to the Town of Los Gatos and to its residents.
I'll make this quick. This has been a wonderful experience for me, but it wasn't me alone. It was every one of these commissioners who worked on this, and especially Valerie Hopkins. Valerie is behind Music in the Park. This is a wonderful town, and I've really enjoyed all of this. Thank you so much.
All right, I'll call up now. I have to find where the names are. Mary Ann Hamilton.
Quick comment. When I was walking down tonight, I did a quick mental calculation, and I multiplied 365 days of the year times 24 hours, back out 8 for maybe 16 hours a day. When Valerie's not thinking about Music in the Park, I came up with 5,840 hours a year that Valerie talks about Music in the Park, thinks about it, and tries to make it better. And I want to thank her for this. Without her, we would not be up here.
Jonathan Knowles.
That's funny because that's exactly the number of emails I got from her about Music in the Park. Rock on, Los Gatos.
Mary Curtis.
So I just want to add that the other night I went over to Valerie's house to deliver some small little something. She was previewing rock bands on YouTube.
Tricia Capri. Jade Bradbury.
Thanks for being a great audience. That's what art is all about. Without the audience, where would we be?
Halfway there. David Stonecipher.
Thank you, Town of Los Gatos, and thank you, Valerie.
Mika Storrs. And the woman that everybody's been talking about, Valerie Hopkins.
Thank you all. This truly was a team effort. I appreciate all the recognition, and it was really a pleasure and a privilege to put on Music in the Park. And we're going to rock again next summer. Thank you.
All right, you all seem to be remembering to submit your cards, but once again, before we get to the consent items, I will ask you, if you're going to plan on speaking on any item, please submit a speaker card. We are now at the consent item portion of our calendar. At this juncture, we have all of our consent items, which we will act upon in a single motion, unless anyone from the audience or from the council wishes to pull an item from the consent calendar. Does anyone from the council wish to pull an item? Mr. Wasserman.
Thank you. Not pulling an item, just reminding you that I have to recuse myself from number 6.
All right. Thank you. Does anyone from the audience wish to pull an item from the consent calendar? And it looks as though item 4, the council minutes of August 25th, 2008, have been pulled by Citizen Ray, correct? All right, that will be heard after other business. Any other item? I see no one coming forward, and I have no card. May I have a motion?
Move to adopt the consent calendar with the exception of the pulled item.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Glickman, seconded by Mr. Przinski, to approve the consent calendar with the exception of item 4, and noting that Mr. Wasserman was recused from item 6. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Passes unanimously. Thank you. Once again, I will remind everybody that if you intend to speak on any item on our agenda, please submit a speaker card to the clerk. I need this especially this evening so that I can manage this meeting efficiently for you and for the applicants and for the speakers and for us. All right, we are now at verbal communications. I have 3 cards submitted on this, and I will just want to announce that if you intend to speak on the DeSantis project, whatever you intend to say, and I will get to more detail on that later, please wait till we get to the DeSantis application as opposed to doing it in verbal communications. Verbal communications should deal with anything that is not on the agenda. So that being said, the first card I have on verbal communications is Citizen Ray.
I'll come on first. Number 1, who said it?
All right, no talking from the audience. That's your first warning, Ray.
It is America.
That's your second.
Scary. Yes. Want to address the council, our TV audience, and our audience tonight about preserving Los Gatos values, okay? Namely, small-town ambiance, save the mountain, its natural beauty, and all the other good things that we stand for. And who will do that best come this next November? None other, in my estimation, than Barbara Spector. Okay? Barbara Spector. Now, I hope you're not going to challenge me. And Michael Caine, chairman of the Planning Commission. Both have amazing honesty and integrity in the public arena. How do I know? Because I've made every council meeting for the past 8 years and every planning commission for the past 8 years, practically. So there you are, a little pitch for the good people. Lastly, more good people. Amazed to read in the Weekly Times this past week that Sarah Cole, the poor woman who had her legs crushed over at the park, Bagley Field. I cannot believe that she and her people filed a lawsuit 6 months ago. 6 months ago, in March. And none of us were told of it. None of us. I read the closed session minutes, or not minutes, the agenda, every week. And I remember nothing about any discussion in closed session about the Sarah Cole matter. Nothing. So what's going on? Brown Act violation? Perhaps. But mainly, I want to say tonight, you've got to fix that parking lot. She got crushed, her life trashed needlessly because of the negligence of the town of Los Gatos in having that parking lot exist in its horrible, hazardous fashion. It's the same way today, and a repeat accident can happen tomorrow. Ugly. So, shame on you, all of you in the town council. And shame on the employees that failed to act and to remove that attractive nuisance. That's the way I see it. It's an attractive nuisance during baseball season when it's jam-packed. And to get out of there, you have to inch out backwards without turning and back into the line of traffic at the commute hour. It is disgustingly dangerous. And you do nothing. You sit there on your hands and do nothing.
Thank you.
Shame on you.
Next speaker, Peggy Dallas.
Hi, I'm Peggy Dallas, and I live at 17681 Foster Road here in Los Gatos. You may have seen my signs popping up around town. I'm here to say that tonight the council is talking about the residential design guidelines and the residential architectural issues regarding a specific development project. And I think as an architect, it would be really good if there was an architect on the town council. That's my input. Thank you.
Thank you. Third and only last card I have is Tom Gogan, or Gogan. All right. Mr. Gogan, I may be saying it wrong, but in any event, he is going to be speaking on agenda item 16. All right, I have no further cards on verbal communications. It appears I may have one more. Is this on verbal communications?
No, it's not on global communications.
Oh, hold on.
Verbal.
May I have the card, please? It looks like W.H. Winter.
Right. And I live in Los Gatos. I've lived here for 45 years. And I never come to the city council because I never get anything done. I'm coming here now because I'm so disgusted with the bureaucratic crap that we're putting up with in the city. Months ago, I called to get our streets fixed, the manhole and water main valves, and the city did a marvelous job. They came out and painted a white circle around each one so that we can now avoid them, but they haven't fixed them. And the way things are going, we'll probably get the rainy weather and they'll come out and maybe do something and tear up the streets. The second thing I'm here about is the undercrossing on Pollard Road. It's a marvelous weed patch, and I wish I could transmit it from Pollard Road to your front lawn. We put up with it for years. The city park guy comes out, he sits in his truck for an hour at a time underneath the overcrossing in the shade and does nothing, except he sometimes goes over and messes with some kind of a covered valve, but I've never seen him pull a weed or do anything else. The last item is the eyesore on the corner of Calle Margarita and Wedgwood. We've put up with that now for over 2 years, and the city has done absolutely nothing, and now it looks like the project is going forward with all the dry rot, rusty nails, building that is totally should be torn down and start over again. But I don't think it's going to happen, so we're going to wind up with a piece of junk on that corner. And we've put up with it for 2 years, and I've talked to the city manager, I've talked to Anton Gillespie or something like that. I've given up trying to take the names of the bureaucrats because I don't believe any of them. And I want to thank you for the time.
Thank you. I have no other cards for verbal communication, so we will close that portion of our agenda, and I will turn to staff and see if there's any response to anything that has been stated thus far.
Madam Mayor, members of the council, a reminder that staff has submitted a Safe Routes to School grant to provide sidewalks for the entire length of Blossom Hill Road from the school up to Via de, Thank you, Citizen Ray. Second, I would like to refer Mr. Winter to our new Director of Parks and Public Works. I don't remember a prior conversation with you, but our Director of Parks and Public Works, Todd Capurso, can follow up on the locations for the manhole issue that you identified, and I'll turn to the town attorney who's been taking enforcement action regarding Calle Margarita.
Thank you. As council is already aware, several months ago, staff both served and recorded a notice of violation and correction order pursuant to the building code on the property at Calle Margarita, citing all of the defects existing on the property. We had tried for several months before that in a pre-enforcement action to get the attention of the owner, who was then trying to sell the property. Unfortunately, the owner didn't respond, so in serving and recording the correction notice, we did get their attention. The owners are now attempting to determine, with the town's cooperation, what steps would be necessary to complete the project. We've had engineering surveys already done on the project to determine what the building official, Mr. Giassi, can and cannot approve for further construction based on the construction work done up until now. The owner apparently has engaged another contractor. I don't know the details regarding that engagement, but apparently they are committed to going forward and completing the project, and the project cannot be completed without the building official's approval, and the building official will follow the advice given to him by the forensic engineering consultant who has already reviewed and reported on the site.
Mr. Larson?
Madam Mayor, members of the council, one additional comment that the Director of Parks and Public Works let me know as he was leaving to talk to Mr. Winter is that the manhole and water valve that had been marked earlier this year were indeed marked for repairs, and the contract for those repairs were approved by the council on the consent calendar tonight under items 9 and 11. And so they were part of the scheduled repairs for this year.
Thank you. And I see that cards are still coming in. I'll ask the clerk to bring them to me as soon as she gets them. The clerk is unsure about this one. It's Rick Artizone, and is this verbal communications? Mr. Artizone, verbal communications as opposed to DeSantis? No. Thank you. All right, we will now go to our public hearings. Now, our first public hearing is Agenda Item 16, and I'm going to read the title of this item into the record and note that the staff has recommended a continuance, but just so you know what it is, update.
Item 15.
Ah, okay. My agenda is numbered wrong. Okay, sorry about that. Stephanie, that takes care of you, too. 15, update and merge the pre-1941 design guidelines and the residential development standards for all single-family and two-family dwellings in all zones except the resource conservation and hillside residential zones. Introduce ordinances amending zoning code consistent with design guidelines. This was continued from August 4th, 2008. It's zoning ordinance amendment A0801, historic designation applications HDO HD0801, HD0802, HD0803, and D0804. The applicant is the town of Los Gatos. Given the number of people who are here to speak on agenda item 16, which was anticipated, staff is suggesting that we continue this item. Is there anybody here in the audience, just by show of hands, I don't have any cards, who intended to speak on agenda item 15? I have no cards. I see no one raising their hand in the audience, and so I will now look to the council for a motion. Mr. Wasserman.
Make the motion to continue agenda item number 15 to October 6th per staff recommendation.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Wasserman, seconded by Mr. Brzezinski to continue this item 15, the guidelines from today to October 6th. All right, further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Passes unanimously. Now, once again, I am asking that all cards be in for agenda item 16. That's our next public hearing, which is an appeal of a planning commission decision denying architecture and site for a new residence, pool, tennis court, and accessory structures within an approved planned development on property zoned HR2, looks like HR2 and a half PD, architecture and site application SO855, APNS 537290007 and 008, property location Kennedy Road at Forster Road, applicant appellant Rob DeSantis. Now, I'm going to go through a few guidelines for our hearing this evening, and then I'm going to take a very short break so I can go through the cards that have been submitted to determine how we're going to have the hearing. But just a few things. I ask that everyone who is going to speak on DeSantis wait until we have the public hearing, but I will let you know that it will be of great benefit, most benefit to the council people if your testimony centers or focuses upon the Planning Commission, what the Planning Commission did, which is being appealed to us, and the architecture and site application. I will ask the council members that I understand that you can ask questions of staff, and I understand that you can ask questions of the people who are testifying, but I will ask council to limit that to questions as opposed to statements, and keep the statements for the end of the public testimony when we're having council discussion. And one more thing before I count the cards and before we have staff give us a report. I'm going to, and I'll tell you what I'm going to do before I do it. I'm going to ask everybody who's here to support Mr. DeSantis to stand, and I will ask staff to count the number of people who have been standing. Then after that, I will ask those who are opposing the DeSantis project to stand, and I will ask staff to count those folks. And so, first of all, everyone who is here to support the DeSantis project, please stand and stay there until staff has counted you. Thank you. Thank you. I'm sorry, Mr. Larson. 49. And everyone who is here to oppose the DeSantis project, please stand. You may sit, and the number is 57. Now, what I'm going to suggest is if you are here this evening only to say I oppose it or I support it, then that might have been communicated by virtue of the fact that you stood and your numbers were counted. If, on the other hand, you have something that you want to testify to other than I support it or I oppose it, then feel free to come forward and testify during our public hearing. At this point, I'm going to take a 4-minute break, and I'm going to count these cards, and I'm going to see how we're going to go forward with this hearing. This meeting is being called back to order. If you could please take your seats. Okay, thank you. All right, if everyone would please take their seats. I'm assuming that all cards have been submitted. I requested that the speaker cards be submitted before we begin this public hearing, and I'm also assuming that these are my last ones. So based on that, each speaker, we're going to start with the staff report, but once we get past the appellant, each speaker will have 2 minutes to speak. But we are going to start with the staff report. Mr. Lortz, Mr. Larson, whoever's going to make it.
Madam Mayor, members of the council, Director of Community Development Bud Lortz will make the staff report. I did just want to introduce the item that what is before the council tonight is an appeal of a planning commission denial of the architecture and site approval for the DeSantis residence, which was the subject of a previously approved plan development by the council. The Planning Commission denied that, what we call an A&S approval, on a divided vote of 4-3, and that has now been appealed by the property owner and applicant to the council for your consideration. And Director Bud Lortz will now provide the staff report, to be followed by the appellant making up to a 10-minute presentation by himself and his representatives, to be followed by public testimony.
Thank you. Mr. Lortz.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council, ladies and gentlemen. By way of background, this application tonight involves a 13.7-acre property located on Kennedy Road, just south of Forester Road. The plan development was approved by the town council on May 5th of 2008. That was the introduction of the plan development ordinance, and then the ordinance was subsequently adopted on May 19th of 2008. Environmental review was included as part of that plan development process. The plan development application was filed in response to the Planning Commission's desire to achieve land use closure. This has been a long discussion, and the Planning Commission was concerned about the uniqueness of the property, the need to establish long-term natural, scenic, and open space easements, as well as to avoid supplemental applications being filed through the architecture and site approval process, or possibly through a building permit process. The plan development application is very detailed, and the plans are highly evolved. The plan development precludes further development and or subdivision of the property. In approving the plan development, the council made 4 exceptions as are allowed under the Hillside Development Standards and Guidelines. The first was to exceed the 6,000 square foot main residence limit, and in this particular case, the floor area for the main residence is allowed under the PD to be 8,650 square feet. A portion of the main house exceeds the 20-foot height limit. A portion of the project is located outside the least restrictive development area, and then portions of the cut and fill depths exceed the standards that are set forth in the Hillside Development Standards and Guidelines. The architecture and site approval that has been submitted for the new house with attached garage, guest quarters, and accessory buildings, including a pond, pool, and tennis court. The accessory buildings are comprised of an art studio, a cabana, a tennis pavilion, and a gatehouse. The location, heights, and floor area of those structures, and as I say, the locations of those structures were shown on the official development plans that were approved as part of the plan development. The main residence has been reduced to the 8,650 square foot maximum. The total floor area for the project is 13,376 square feet. That includes all of the accessory structures proposed. The PD allows for a maximum of 14,700 square feet. Under the proposal that's before this council, and remember this is an architecture and site approval consistent with the PD, the proposal that is before this council as part of that architecture and site approval includes new fencing, a wrought iron fence around the pool area and a security fence, a landscape plan that provides locations over the ornamental planting, the turf, the transitional areas, and the natural hillside areas which are to be planted with native species trees. An open space easement will be dedicated over a significant portion of the property, preserving it in a natural state. The applicant is committed to building a green project. The Greenpoint checklist was used as approved by council and was completed. The project scored 280 points, and 50 points is required to be a project that's certified as green. The rough grading plans were included in the plans set for information only. The grading is not part of the architecture and site approval in this instance because the architecture and because the fairly detailed grading plans were included as part of the PD and were approved as the official development plans for the project as part of that PD. The project is compliant with the Hillside Development Standards and Guidelines, the Hillside Specific Plan, and the Plan Development Ordinance. And the reason that we say this is the council previously made findings that the project was compliant with the Hillside Development Standards and Guidelines, the General Plan, and the Hillside Specific Plan in order to approve the PD. That concludes staff's report. As you know, this evening the project is before you because the Planning Commission denied the architecture and site application regarding two issues, the security fencing and the landscape plan being incomplete. As I mentioned, the applicant appealed and is here before you on an appeal. That concludes staff's report.
Thank you. Mr. Larson, are you or Mr. Korb, who's not there, going to step through with the council the deny the appeal, approve the appeal, that portion of our work this evening?
Yes, we can do that right now, Madam Mayor. Let me pull forward the notes. To take action tonight, as indicated on page 1 of the staff report, following the public hearing, the council may take either of two actions. First, you may deny the appeal and uphold the Planning Commission's decision to deny architecture and site application SOA 0855. If the council were to take that action, then the Planning Commission's prior decision stands, and the applicant would have to return to the Planning Commission addressing the two issues just cited in the last slide on the screen. Alternatively, the council could grant the appeal based upon one of the three criteria or findings listed at the top of page 2 of the staff report, and upon granting of that appeal, the council could take any action whatsoever on the ANS, on the architectural and site application, from approving it to denying it to continuing it to conditioning it as the council may choose.
Thank you. And we hear the word de novo thrown around, and as I understand what you've just said, is that if the council should choose to grant the appeal, the entire project, the entire ANS is before us de novo. Is that correct, Mr. Korb?
That is correct. It also means that this is a brand-new hearing and new evidence can be introduced regarding the project, or I should say regarding the ANS application, which is before you tonight.
Thank you very much. Questions of staff? Mr. Glickman.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. We received a desk item this evening from an attorney representing a group calling itself Friends of the Hillsides, who I gather is suing the town of Los Gatos. Would the town attorney wish to comment on that desk item?
I don't like to comment on pending litigation, but I will say that the argument made in the letter by Mr. Hare representing the petitioners in that case is an argument that they're currently making to the court. And that's concerning whether the court should issue any orders that would either prohibit the town from issuing any permits or prohibit Mr. DeSantis from acting on any permits. It's a matter being litigated. I don't want to comment on that any further. The arguments that are made there are arguments that are points that are not necessarily what the staff understands regarding the PD approval, and if necessary, would say that to the court.
Mr. Larson?
Madam Mayor, members of the council, and just to clarify, there was indeed a desk item distributed by staff to the council tonight. It includes items 16 and 17, which were 2 letters from adjacent or nearby properties supporting the applicant tonight that were received before the 3 o'clock staff deadline. The letter from Mr. Hare that was referenced by Councilman Glickman was distributed directly to you by, I believe, the author or the representative of the author.
Thank you. Other questions of staff? Yes, Mr. Wasserman.
Thank you, and I'll try and word this, Madam Mayor. I understand not commenting on any current litigation, Mr. Korb. So I guess my question would be of Mr. Lortz, if I may, Madam Mayor. Thank you. In the aforementioned letter that was received from Mr. Hare, there's 2 sentences. I guess what I'm asking is I need to know whether or not they're true, or if staff can comment on this, comment on them at this time. Those aren't even tough words when you put them all together.
If I may,
yes,
Mayor,
please.
Councilmember Wasserman and all members of council, staff does not concur with the interpretation of the PD ordinance stated in that letter. Staff would not have issued the permits in question had it not concurred with that view. That's beyond that. This argument will be made, as I understand, before the court. This argument may not even be relevant after tonight's hearing. However, that's an issue to be resolved later.
Thank you. I believe I can ask a question that doesn't affect that, Madam Mayor.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Mr. Lortz, the comment about a tree removal permit which allowing for the removal of 33 trees, is that something that was contained in the approved PD back 4 months ago?
Yes.
Thank you.
Other questions of staff? I have a couple. Other than and what I'm trying to do is I want to just establish a basis for what we're doing and what's old and what's new. Other than the applicant's letter of September 9th, 2008, and the applicant's appeal, do we, council, have any other information that the Planning Commission did not have, including now the letters that we got as desk items?
No.
All right. Then on page 7 and 8 of the staff report, you have a discussion of the mitigated negative declaration, and that has about a half a dozen items that were supposed to be, or the mitigated neg dec referenced, that would be discussed as part of the architecture and site application. Were all of those already addressed as part of the PD?
Yes.
And let me be real specific. In some of those, there is reference to a condition. In some of those, there is not a reference to a condition. So I guess my greatest concern is with those items that don't have a PD condition reference.
If they weren't included with a condition, then they were addressed as part of the official development plans.
And then my last question, did the Planning Commission have landscaping plans?
They had the same landscape plans that are before you this evening.
And when you say that, you're making reference to what exhibit or attachment?
Give us just a second.
All right.
We have a fair number of plans here, so give us just a moment.
Well, I'm going to assume that I know which one it is, but I shouldn't assume. I'm going to let you just tell us.
It's attachment 5. There's a full-size set.
Thank you. Other questions? Mr. Glickman.
Not so much a question as a request, because there was considerable discussion both here and at the Planning Commission hearing about what was and wasn't before us, before then, what is encompassed by ANS, what part of the project is already stare decisis, as the lawyers say, settled law. So, Madam Mayor, I was just suggesting that staff might, for all the people who are listening who are not steeped in this, just a quick review of what is and isn't before us probably would be helpful for the understanding of everybody.
I'll certainly allow staff to speak to that, but other than to say that it's architecture and site and that it comes from the Planning Commission, I don't know how much more specific we can get, but I will defer to Mr. Korb.
As I stated at the Planning Commission meeting, as the project developed, and when I talk about the project, I mean the PD that was previously approved by Council, developed to the point of approval by Council, it had a great deal of detail, much of which we do not normally associate with a planned development ordinance, but rather would associate with architecture and site. That's not the way the project began, as I understand, but that's the way it ended. All of the issues that were decided at the PD that are addressed in the ordinance and in the official development plans that are attached to and incorporated within the ordinance have been decided. And that does include quite a bit of the architecture, quite a bit of the layout of the project, heights, footprints, etc. There are some issues remaining for decision on architecture and site. Some of those were identified as grounds for denial by the members of the Planning Commission who voted in that manner. They included issues concerning the security wall, which was not specifically, it was addressed, but it wasn't actually envisioned in the official development plans approved by the by Council. In other words, it wasn't actually shown. So the detail regarding that was brought for review for the first time in ANS. Some landscaping issues were not addressed in the PD and were considered for the first time in ANS. Some questions concerning lighting, I'm not quite sure what they are, but some questions concerning lighting, exterior lighting, were raised for the first time at ANS and had not been addressed at the PD level. Those are all original questions for review on ANS.
Mr. Lortz, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just wanted to, reiterate what Mr. Korb just told us, that except for those issues which you just specifically called out, other issues regarding this project have been settled, were not before the Planning Commission, and are not before us.
That's correct. It may very well be that members of the Council may be able to identify something more, or members of staff may identify something more that was not in the PD. It was a very complicated ordinance, very complicated plans, but those are the items that were identified by the members of the Planning Commission as not having been addressed earlier on at the PD level.
Mr. Lortz?
The PD in this instance, and this has been an evolutionary process for the town as PDs have come before the Council in the last probably 4 or 5 years, where applicants are asked by the Planning Commission to provide more detail on the front end, meaning through the PD process, and then it means that there's less opportunity for the typical architecture and site application items to be considered when ANS comes through subsequently. So in this particular case, the plans were highly evolved. The architecture was set forth through the PD. The height, the size, the footprint, very detailed plans were provided through that process. The Planning Commission correctly identified fencing as an issue, lighting as an issue, copper roofing as an issue, and those are, along with other items, are included on pages 5 and 6 of the staff report.
All right, Mr. Korb, and then we can get into our testimony.
My apologies, Madam Mayor, members of the council. I did recall that there was a discussion also at Planning Commission. You, I'm sure, saw it in your review of the transcripts regarding what was referred to as hydrology. It really was, I think, irrigation related to the landscaping.
Thank you. All right, I'm now going to begin the testimony. I will tell the individuals standing back at various doors, if you want to stand for a long time, that's fine, but we also have some available seating here in front. I'm going to begin with the applicant, who's also the appellant. The applicant/appellant has up to 10 minutes, and that includes statements by not only Mr. DeSantis, but anyone here representing him on this appeal. Mr. DeSantis, you're going to give us your name, please.
Hi, my name is Rob DeSantis. Good evening, Mayor and council members and fellow community members. I'm here this evening with my A&S application following the May PD approval of my home here at council. My application is consistent in every way with the approved PD, and I request that you grant the appeal and approve the application this evening. The Planning Commission overreached their responsibility and attempted to create policy or modify policy already set by council. My family and I have been residents of Los Gatos for over 16 years. We love the town. Our children go to school here, and we are involved with several local organizations such as Los Gatos Education Foundation. 4.5 years ago, I bought 13.7 acres of land, hired a world-class architect, met with my neighbors, met with the town, and proceeded to design our family home. Working with all elements of the town over the past several years, and at a cost in the tens of thousands, I have hired civil engineers, soils engineers, environmental consultants, arborists, green technology experts, water experts, and have assembled a team to work with me and the town on every issue with the hope of having an open, collaborative project that we can all be proud of. An important element of my project was that I originally had the legal ability to subdivide the property. Now, I could have just tried to build a home, come back and then add a pool, and then come back and add a pool house, and then eventually peel off the unwanted property and sell that to a developer to recoup some of my costs. But instead, I chose to get everything out in the open and investigate the best way to approach my family home. My concept was new. Use 2 lots on 13.7 acres for one home to my financial detriment. This was an interesting concept, as building less, grading less, disturbing the property less was clearly the best option for the land, the town, the neighbors, and in this case, me. Without this concept, the only way for large landowners to get value out of their property is to subdivide, which I don't think in the big picture is the town's intent. However, how could lot mergers be implemented? The way was through something called a PD, a plan development. With a PD, the property would be rezoned. Once the PD was complete, the use of that land would forever be defined and restricted, bringing land use closure to this 13.7 acre property. So what happened? Since my proposed home and site would not be visible to the town, including most of the neighbors, the town considered my project with the following input. Give up future development rights, no more subdivision. Build significantly less structure than could otherwise be built. Create an open space easement on a substantial part of the property and maintain wildlife movement corridors. Follow the hillside guidelines, meet or beat green standards, and study grading and look at site activity, LRDA, tree loss, and export. Well, this turned out to be a tall order to fill, costing more time and tens of thousands of dollars. With unprecedented analysis, we found ways to minimize site disturbance, eliminate export, and every combination in between. There was another key element to our site. This land was not virgin land. It had previously been farmland with orchards. It had been disturbed, used, and graded before by farmers. They had cut in a road and left the dirt piled up alongside. They had cut off the top of the knoll and created a pad. that if used for a house would have huge grading and visual impact. So we thought, hillside restoration. Let's meet the town's directives and restore the scarred areas of the 13.7-acre property back to a more natural state. When we looked at minimizing all the factors, not impacting the environment, solving the practical issues such as fire department access, neighborhood visibility, and hillside restoration, the right answers became clear. This was done over a several-year time period, and when all was said and done, working very close with all aspects of the town, we came up with the best plan for all. So we were approved in May. So why are we here tonight? I am seeking A&S approval on appeal. Section 2920.140 of the Town Code says, the intent of the A&S application is for quality design and proper siting of residential and commercial structures complementing the town environment. It goes on to say the purpose is to regulate the height, width, shape, proportion, siting, exterior construction, and design to ensure architectural compatibility. All this was done on my home. At additional costs, and again more tens of thousands, I worked all those details into the PD during the past 4.5 years, which left very little remaining. All responsible people in town, including the town's consulting architect, have reviewed and found my A&S one of the most complete applications ever submitted and consistent with the PD. The Planning Commission ignored the council policy regarding my property and established by the PD rezoning approval. All of the A&S submittals are entirely consistent with the PD plans as approved, and with the conditions of approval, including an organized traffic management plan for our community on Kennedy Road. There are 73 conditions in the PD and 44 in the A&S application, for a total of 117 conditions on my home and this project. I feel the needs of the town have been well captured and addressed. We have been responsive, thoughtful, collaborative in our approach, and therefore request your approval this evening.
Thank you. Questions of Mr. DeSantis? Just a couple. Why do you say your appeal says that the Planning Commission decision was outside the scope of the PD, and the motion was based on planting and fence? Why do you say that that's outside the scope of the PD?
I believe it's outside the scope because in the PD it clearly states that I'm able to have security fencing, and the comments and the Planning Commission comments regarding the denial associated with the security fencing, I felt was out of policy and was in agreement with Ms. Jensen's comments, that she also felt the approval that the PD allowed for a security fence, and that to go against it for that reason was a policy issue. She felt the same was true for the landscaping plan. We provided every element of the landscaping plan that, as I understand it, in more detail than virtually any A&S application ever submitted to the town, and I was denied for not enough detail in the landscape plan. So that was my...
Okay, good. What is it about the location of your proposed security fencing why did you choose that location for the fencing to provide your family security as opposed to some other location?
Great question. And it was one that first originally came up at the Planning Commission, and I thought that was a very good question as well. So when we took a look at the several things, one, protecting the landscape, two, protecting my small dogs, and three, protecting my children, we took a look and started thinking, okay, what do we need to do? And when we took a look at all the security fencing that we would have around all the ornamental landscaping in the different areas of the site, we saw that, wow, we may stop the deer from eating a few plants, but we're not going to create any type of protective zone for my children to play away from any coyotes that might come into play. Further, in talking to one of my neighbors, Jack Ferrone, who's on the opposite side of the street and has probably the best bird's eye view of my property, he owns the 40 acres, or 25 to 40 acres on the opposite side. He said that he called my property he called it a cul-de-sac of death for the wildlife. He said because what happens is all the other properties around me are fenced, and so what happens is the coyotes now know that, and they will flush out deer to my property and get them down there, and the deer have no place to go because it's all fenced off on all the other sides, and then the coyotes several times a year go to town on the deer, and we've experienced that living right there. And I thought that was an interesting observation that he made. Well, anyway, when we took a look at all of those things, and we took a look at the visibility issues and concerns, we said, well, how do we create a secure site for the pets, the kids, and the landscape, and not create and maintain wildlife movement corridors and maintain neighborhood visibility issues, and actually improve it based on what we could do by putting a bunch of islands of fence around. We came up with the proposed layout that you're looking at. And in that proposed layout, we're able to allow more than half of the site to be maintained for wildlife habitat and movement, north, south, east, west on the property. But at the same end, we're able to put in a fence that the lines of the fence became pretty obvious as to what to do, as I mentioned in my letter, especially working with the neighbors, because this 600 trees up along Kennedy Road, and it creates a great blockage and also a great corridor for the wildlife movement. Well, if we get the fence up there at the right level, neighbors can't see the fence, the wildlife can still move very nicely, and so when we addressed visibility concerns and wildlife corridors and the things we needed to protect, we came up with the plan that you see.
Okay, thank you. Other questions? Thank you. All right, we're now going to get into the public testimony, and given the number of people who wish to speak, each speaker will have 2 minutes. I'm going to read the names of the first 3 speakers so that you're all ready to go. The first one will be Bahram Sagari, followed by Jack Little, followed by George, looks like Polari. Bahram Sagari.
Good evening. I'm Bahram Sagari. I'm a resident of Los Gatos for the past 17 years. My kids go to school here, and I'm a friend of Bob DeSantos. Rob and I have been biking in that area quite a bit. During our long bike rides, he's been telling me, and I've been involved throughout the whole process of the purchase of the land, the choice of the architect, and what he plans to do. And during these rides, he has always been very open to me as what he was doing. He, from the very beginning, went through an excruciating mission to find a green architect. He was consumed by making sure that everything that he does not insult the land. It maintains a great deal of green space that is available, and it is good for everyone. I'm actually very disappointed with all the obstacles that has been thrown his way, particularly with folks in the Friends of the Hillside, wondering where these people were a few years ago when all the development that was going on in that area. I have been biking in that area. I've seen how much is being built. And some of them are eyesores, even to bypassers. And I'm here just to express my opinion about how I feel about this project. And again, how carefully he has been deciding on what to do with this land to make sure that he meets all the requirements. And in fact, I'm again upset that he's so consumed by this that I cannot go biking with him anymore. Thank you.
Thank you. Jack Little, followed by George Polari.
And if I could ask all speakers to speak clearly and loudly into the microphone, both for this audience as well as the viewing audience.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, council members. As I've watched this story unfold over the last couple of years, I've been kind of very disturbed as a resident here because of the great difficulty Mr. DeSantis has gone through, not only from a planning standpoint, as I guess what I heard was he has over 100 conditions placed on this. I've looked at the plans. I've talked to actually friends of mine who are direct neighbors of his who have properties that are adjacent to the property he is going to be building on. They all are highly in favor of what he has done, the concessions he has made, and I must say I respect how the council and the Planning Commission has required a lot of things to make this project beneficial to all the citizens of Los Gatos. I mean, as a resident here myself, and my kids want to live here as soon as they can afford it, we want the community to continue to be something that we're proud of and not overbuilt. You guys have done a great job of, I think, trying to make sure the project is in line with those ideals. From what I can see, Mr. DeSantis is bent over backwards to make this happen. This really worries me as somebody who wants to build a home at some time in the future, maybe not quite on the scale that Mr. DeSantis will, but just in terms of his basic rights to get this done without undue obstacles, and to face a nameless organization, Friends of the Hillside. That always worries me when somebody stands behind a moniker like that. And basically, I think that given the fact he's complied with all these things, and the idea of subdividing this thing really horrifies me. And I would hate to see this beautiful place not be built and then have it subdivided into multiple places that really would be abhorrent to the hillside. So I think that, it's my request that we give him the appeal that he
Thank
requests.
you, sir.
Thanks.
We'll now have George Polari, followed by Yolanda Drager, followed by Rick Artizone.
Hi, George Polari. I live on 116 Teresita Way, and we have a direct view of the property from our backyard. We support the project, but more importantly, I want to echo some of the comments of the previous speaker in that this process has gone on for 4.5 years without resolution or without clean resolution, and that's embarrassing to me. Having lived here 8 years, we have children in the school systems here, and it seems like there are other motivations and other things going on when a project like this can be just not shut down or not green lighted after 4.5 years. It seems like something else is going on here, and I just wish people would level with each other and get things worked out, because it's just not fair to the town. And many of us in the neighborhood support the project. We feel Mr. DeSantis has complied and been obedient through the process, and I don't know what more we need to ask of him. Thank you.
Thank you. Yolanda Drager.
Good evening, Council. Thank you for allowing me to address this grave subject. My name's Yolanda Drager. I live at 16200 Mile Way. Why do I say grave subject? Because it is the death of the integrity and the authority of our Planning Commission. It is also the death of our Hillside Plan that a group of citizens gave their time for years to develop so that we would have guidelines and we wouldn't have blatant disregard for our hillsides. Some of the oversized homes that Mr. DeSantis has identified were homes built prior to our guidelines and the very reason that we developed them. Look around you. We're talking about 3 acres, double the height of this room, cut off of the top of our hillside. We're talking about Main Street down to Highway 9 as I know it, or Saratoga Avenue, 3 football fields end to end, cut off 2.5 stories, 1,000 or more dump truck loads of dirt. Listen, your guidelines were the guidelines for our county and what could be developed in our hillsides by the county. There are 30-plus acres just above you. They're now trying for 12 lots. That is looking, if you can see this, can you? That would be looking down at our high school field and the main street in town. One of the houses they were talking about is 25,000 square feet. But this county has always gone by the guidelines of this community. Without laws and regulations, we have nothing.
Thank you. We have Rick Artizone, followed by Doug McNeil, followed by Citizen Ray.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and fellow council members. We're obviously here to address the Planning Commission's decisions regarding the architectural and site application of Mr. DeSantis. Yet there's more which rests upon the shoulders of you, the council members, tonight, and that is whether the Planning Commission has overstepped their bounds and whether the use of power is appropriate with regards to the conditions that they've applied to this application. So, for example, the number of them, they've talked about it, but also the specific conditions, which my experience here in town may be somewhat limited been here since '64, been in the real estate business for 20 years, gone forth and dealt with a number of customers who have dealt with applications. I have never seen any extent, seen the number of conditions applied, and yet I understand the scope of this application is very large, yet at the same time we have to listen and look at the balance and say whether these are applicable to any application. It's become very evident to me that it's become a political issue within members of the community by using Mr. DeSantis' application as a form to further their agenda. I appeal to you, the Town Council of Los Gatos, to redirect that focus, the focus of this process, back to the appropriate agenda, which is to review the planning process within the scope mandated by law and code, and to remove us from the personal agendas present, and to approve Mr. DeSantis' application. So thank you for your time. I know this is a difficult decision. It's a very hot potato, if you will, in this town, so I appreciate your efforts on this. Thank you.
Thank you. Doug McNeil, followed by Citizen Ray, followed by Dan Devine.
Good evening. Doug McNeil, 17413 Pleasant View Avenue. Section 2920-140D of the Zoning Code states in part that the purpose of the architecture and site approval is to regulate the height, width, proportion, siding, exterior construction, and design the buildings to ensure that they are architecturally compatible with the surroundings. I think any time as a community we see a case where you have to take exceptions to get approval, it's going to open up and create suspicion or suspect that this rule is applied to an individual case, and in comparison to other members of the community trying to do the same thing, creates issue. I feel for the applicant that this process has taken so long, but when you take exception to guidelines and rules, it opens you up to introspection, reflection, review, re-review, and the process gets protracted. I think the key thing, and it's a fair question to ask of the members of the community and people who look at the hillside, who respect the hillside, to understand, as was stated by the Planning Commission, that the security wall, the landscaping, and the lighting need to be reviewed. The impact on the view, the impact on the hillside needs to be carefully understood. It's unfortunate that it took this long for those plans to be submitted and understood. But when you're looking at the amount of lights, the frontal area, the structure, the siding, the maximum use of trees that could help cover or mitigate the site, it should be carefully considered. And I think that's what both the community and the hillside would like to see. So I think when it comes back to Section 2920-140D, and there are exceptions made to planning guidelines and rules, as seen by staff, as seen by the architectural committee, as seen by the community, as there's 57 people in this room voting against it, as the same group of people showed up earlier, it needs to be carefully considered. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Citizen Ray, followed by Dan Devine.
Yes, indeed. First comment. Let's make sure the audience knows that the testimony tonight is de novo under California case law, all right? We're not held to landscaping, fencing, or anything else. The community that's here tonight can speak on any issue they wish, and I think you need to make that clear, okay? Next, Hillside Specific Plan. What have you heard about it? Nothing from the Sky Lords, other than he's referred to it by name. I want to read it to you, what it says. Hillside Specific Plan, goals of the Los Gatos Hillside Plan, preservation of the irreplaceable natural environment of the mountains. Repeat, preservation of the irreplaceable natural environment of the mountains. What is bulldozing, filling 3.5 acres on the mountain have to do with the natural beauty of the mountain? Nothing. The only beauty is in the eyes of this obscene overdeveloper, whatever his name is.
Address your comments to us, please.
Of course. Of course. Want me to go louder? Again, guess what? Under architectural and site review, and again, not a word of this in the last 4 years from this Lortz character. Not a word. Let me read it to you. Architectural, and that's what this is tonight. Architectural and site review procedure or design review shall be required for all development proposals in the hillsides, buildings, grading, roads, parking areas, landscaping, and outdoor lighting. Purpose is to provide for the design, I'm wrapping up,
Mr. Davis,
of building sites which will be appropriate with mountain environment. Mountain environment.
Ray, sit down, please.
Yeah, jawohl.
Dan Devine. Dan Devine, followed by Jeffrey Hare and Zenon Zobriski, I think.
Who needs it? Who needs it?
Dan Devine.
Good evening, Madam Mayor and Council members. Page 15 of the initial study stated that a stormwater pollution and prevention plan is being prepared and that such a report is required prior to the start of rough grading. Well, since the grading permits have been issued, I would like to understand where the promised plan is because it can't be found in the town files. These studies were promised but never produced. Does anyone on the staff follow up on these issues? Are these not important? Well, considering the extensive amount of herbicides, algicides, pesticides, and fertilizers needed for the proposed lawn, ornamental vegetation, pool, and pond maintenance, and water storage areas, the fact that runoff from this area drains into Ross Creek, I believe that these are very important considerations. Plus, this all ties into landscaping and hydrology, water quality, and erosion concerns. I would like to understand from the town council and staff why this hasn't happened. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor and members of the City Town Council. My name is Jeffrey Hare, and I am the attorney for Friends of the Hillside. I'll be very short. First question, as noted earlier, is that this is before you a matter requesting grading plan approval as part of the ANS. It states on page 105 of your report. The grading permit was issued already, even though by your own action, on May 19th, when you adopted the ordinance, you stated that all 73 conditions must be met before any grading permit would be issued. A grading permit was issued regardless on the 28th of August, the day after the Planning Commission voted as it did, bringing the matter to you. Now, aside from the issue of the irreplaceable and irreparable harm that would be caused if the applicant were allowed to go forward with the grading, and Mr. Korb is correct, we are going to be in court on that issue if you proceed with this matter. We also have to look at the other issues here. The ANS covers a wide range of issues, one of which is, of course, the hydrology. And I take issue only with the letter that's before you from the applicant appellant tonight. He claims that the hydrology is not an ANS requirement, and yet the initial study calls out specifically this issue would be covered under the ANS part of the process. We have not seen any of this covered under the ANS process, and yet it is there and is part of the stormwater requirements that must be complied with and are required as part of the process before you issue the grading permit. So we ask that you please stick to the process and ask that you please deny the appeal, and if you grant that, to please rescind the grading permit and the tree permit until we can go through the rest of the process. Thank you very much.
Mr. Hare, let me see if there's any questions for you. All right. When you were talking about at the beginning of your presentation that something has to be completed, what were you making reference to there?
Section 5 of the ordinance that was passed on May 19th. It was introduced on the 5th and adopted on the 19th. Section 5 of that, just the paragraph that's before the 73 enumerated conditions, states that all of the following conditions must be complied with before any grading or construction permits are issued.
Thank you. And one other one, you're saying that hydrology comes under ANS even in the situation of this where we have a PD that's been adopted?
That's correct.
And why do you say that?
What happens here is that as part of the initial study and through the follow-up comments made by Geyer and Geyer, they specifically said that the compliance with the provision C3 of the NPDES requirements, which are new and have been added to it, require that the town go through the process of compliance with the provisions of the stormwater runoff. Mr. DeSantis, in his letter, states that this is not an ANS requirement. He also states that there's no policies that are pertain to that. I take issue with that, and I found today on the Santa Clara County Valley Water System website specifically 47 pages identified just for the town of Los Gatos in policies and procedures that pertain to the water runoff issues. So there's no shortage of policies and procedures that apply to this. None of this has been addressed, and Geyer and Geyer specifically said this would be addressed as part of the ANS process, and it's not been done.
Thank you. All right, we have Zenon Zabriskie, followed by John Grounds, followed by Karen, looks like, McKissy.
Madam Mayor, members of the City Council, City Attorney, and the Head of Planning Department, I commend you for 4 years of hard work and a lot of money spent on that project, and your valuable time, mine and everybody else. Madam Mayor, you said we should address the behavior of the Planning Commission, and I, as a witness to that fiasco, will tell you about it. First, one of the members, a woman member of the Planning Commission, made a prejudicial statement before consideration. She said following: the house is a beautiful, beautiful house, the most beautiful house in the whole valley, but it does not belong on a hillside. That is not the purview of the Planning Commission. This land is zoned for hillside construction, period. She shouldn't make such statement. The other member, again a female of the Planning Commission, was pressurizing Mr. DeSantis to change the copper roof. Well, the city ordinance says the copper roof is allowed. So why is she pushing Mr. DeSantis to produce documents and so forth about the copper flowing on the hillside? Prejudicial nature of Planning Commission is very evident. 3 members of the commission said that the city council is the governing body and whatever their decisions are final.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Mr. Grounds, followed by Carol McKissy.
Madam Mayor, Council, thank you for your time. I'm John Grounds. I've lived in Los Gatos for 20 years and currently at 301 Almendra. Council members, I feel there's a major conflict of interest surrounding the decisions being made by some of the planning commissioners regarding this project, as well as other projects. The chair of the Planning Commission, Michael Kane, was asked at the most recent Planning Commission if he had attended any meetings with the special interest group, Friends of the Hillside. When asked about this, he did not disclose that he had attended several of their meetings. He was also, as I understand it, accepting money from this group while he was chair for the DeSantis project. The DeSantis project is a project that Friends of the Hillside are so opposed to that they've sued the town over it. I respectfully ask that the town, which took responsibility in appointing Michael Kane, now take responsibility for investigating the ethics of this commissioner. I believe that Mr. DeSantis has been denied his due process of law in this regard. And Mr. Kane's bias towards the special interest group has tainted the values the value of his opinion and created a conflict of interest, and that now makes it impossible for him to make a fair decision on this or other projects. Thank you.
Thank you. Carol McDissy.
Hello. I have been a resident of Montessorino for 28 years, and I love this town. I love this area. I love the hills. I frequently go hiking throughout. But I'm really troubled by the rhetoric that I read in the town newspaper, by the lawsuit that's being affected. I feel that if we're looking at a parcel of land that can be subdivided into 2, which would amount to a tremendous amount of grading, building, disruption of the environment, and so forth, that Mr. DeSantis, in building one project, one swimming pool, and one tennis court, whatever those structures might be, would seem to me a lot less impactful than having 2. Thank you for your consideration. I know this is a tough one.
Thank you. Frank Del Fuego, followed by Dennis Omanoff, followed by Ernest Culp.
Good evening. My name is Frank Del Fuego. I live at 18400 Overlook Road in Los Gatos. Council has a complex task in deliberating and reaching a reasonable decision based on matters like the one before you now. Occasionally, not often, many of us feel that perhaps you were misled on a decision, even though you acted in good faith. Having said that, I'll address the issue at hand. Council approved the single residence as a planned development, which is unusual for a single residence. Council also stated that final approval was subject to architectural and site approval, and also directed that the Planning Commission would conduct the A&S review. At the A&S review, the Planning Commission did not approve the A&S plan. Among several considerations, they assessed, number 1, that the landscape plan did not have sufficient analysis and conclusions regarding the hydrology impacts, both surface and subsurface, which, by the way, might affect the runoff into Ross Creek. Number two, that the fencing design and layout did not have sufficient analysis and conclusions regarding the impact on wildlife and habitat standards and movement patterns. And finally, that the lighting design and configuration did not have sufficient analysis and conclusions to assess the impact on wildlife and habitat standards and the visual impact on nearby properties. So I sincerely ask, have these analyses been accomplished? If not, why? If so, are they documented and available for review? I urge you to consider these questions during your deliberations. Thank you for allowing me to speak.
Thank you. Dennis Omanoff?
My name is Dennis Omanoff, and I'm here to speak in support of the DeSantis project. I don't know Mr. DeSantis, but I have experienced firsthand how what should be a very pleasant and value-added process gets perverted into a very disrespectful public humiliation for the crime of building a home in Los Gatos. It's an incredible waste of taxpayers' money, total and flagrant disregard of the neighbor's desires and neighborhoods, which he has unanimous support, and some fiscally disastrous consequences for many unintended victims who suffer a significant decrease in potential value, what I would call a taking, without notification. What I'm describing is the opposite of a core value of small-town character, which should be defined by the behaviors in which our town is responsive, welcoming of families, adding to both the social and economic fabric. The fundamental issue, the DeSantis family wishes to build a home, which in most parts of America is usually welcomed in towns. It's a good thing. And by the neighborhood in which they plan to live, it's welcome and acceptable. The people want it. I had a conversation with one of our neighbors recently, across from the home I built. He's a recently retired school teacher, and the majority of their wealth is tied up in their home. Well, the hillside standard has unintended consequences. It now prevents someone from buying their property and building a larger home, although the FAR would be better than some ex-mayors of this town. The punishment we put the DeSantis family through will discourage such a buyer. The guidance and guidelines will discourage such a buyer. So there's real financial consequences to our current property owners. As the person that may want to buy our properties, the person that may want to buy the property may not have the resolve of DeSantis and his family.
Thank you, sir. Ernest Culp, followed by Richard Satan.
Good evening. My name is Ernest Culp, and I'm here in support of Mr. DeSantis and his proposed home on Kennedy Road. As longtime resident of the town of Los Gatos, I have witnessed many changes in the town over the years. I find it to be a complete travesty that certain town politicians would have the audacity to perch their political agenda on the shoulders of a private citizen. It does not matter whether it is Mr. DeSantis or another resident in the future. It is wrong. It is also wrong for a member of the Planning Commission to take a political donation from the Friends of the Hillside and then vote on a project that is being opposed by the group that supported his election. Is that not collusion? Is it not town policy that possible conflicts of interest be disclosed? Is it not important to maintain the appearance of open disclosure so that there is no personal political agenda of a commission member affecting the process? If it is not, it should be. Mr. DeSantis and his family have been caught in the political rent cycle for over 4 years. Can you imagine the expense and, even more importantly, the family time lost that can never be retrieved? For what? The DeSantis residence, or proposed residence, by comparison to many homes in the foothills, is not even visible. So what is all this about? Is it about the fact that he has financial means to construct a project such as he has proposed? Mr. DeSantis has a set of working drawings more detailed than the majority of the plans that pass through the building department, period. Yet he finds himself here again. I think that the town needs to take pause and think about how criminal it has been to waste the town of Los Gatos resources like this. And of course, bring back into focus what the DeSantis families had to go through over the past 4 years. It seems that this process stopped being about the construction of a single-family residence long ago. This needs to come to an end this evening. Thank you.
Richard Satan, followed by Brian Donnelly, and by Julie Donnelly.
Good evening. My name is Richard Sexton. I would like to read a written statement from Peter Donnelly of 16412 Peacock Lane. Peter is currently travelling on business and unavailable. Headline, September 16th, 2008. Last night, after a lengthy public hearing, the Town Council made an unprecedented decision to approve a massive fenced compound off of Kennedy Road. In doing so, it sent a message loud and clear that the rules it adopted in 2004 to govern development activity in the hillside around Los Gatos only applied to those that could choose to follow them, or that choose to follow them. Some key terms within the current rules were defined by this decision. Page 10, Section F. Standards are mandatory, non-discretionary regulations that must be followed. Was redefined as, we think these are good ideas, but if you don't like them, then tell us what you do like and we probably approve it. Page 56, Section A. PDs in hillside areas are to ensure appropriate location of residential units in the LRDA of the site. Was redefined as PDs can be used to circumvent all of the rules in place for everyone else, provided you have smart enough lawyers and an army of experts. We know it's not supposed to be used this way, so please keep this to yourself. Page 67, Section F. Exceptions from the standard in the documents may only be granted after carefully considering the constraints of the site. Were defined as, if you propose an absolute inappropriate project for your site, we'll say no at the Planning Department, then no again at the Planning Commission, and then say yes at the Town Council. We may require you to make a handful of minor changes, so we can say you worked cooperatively to achieve the balanced outcome, but that's just to keep everyone happy. In closing, establishing a two-class system for developing within Los Gatos is inequitable and most likely illegal. You cannot...
Thank you, sir.
Sorry.
Brian Donnelly, followed by Julie Donnelly, followed by Thomas Farida.
Good evening, council members. My name is Ryan Donnelly, and I live at 16412 Peacock Lane in Los Gatos. My father has spoken at a number of these meetings over the past few months, but unfortunately he is away on business this week and can't attend the meeting. So I've decided to speak to you tonight because I think this is an important topic for the town and for the future generations who want to call Los Gatos home. I'm a big fan of Los Gatos for many reasons, but most importantly because it is a great place to live and has a strong sense of community. Communities are built on shared ideals and a common set of goals for the future of the town itself. For Los Gatos, one of those shared ideals is the protection of our surrounding hillsides. It is hard for me to understand how the town can publish and adopt a set of rules for something and then allow someone to completely ignore these rules. That doesn't work for me in school, and it certainly does not work for me at home. If I don't follow the rules, there are repercussions, including being asked to start again and do it the right way. Why then does Mr. DeSantis get to ignore the rules and get rewarded for doing so? What does this say to the people in the community that have followed the rules? And just as importantly, what does it say to those people who are starting out on the process? I think the people who have followed the rules would be really mad because complying with the rules is quite tough and it takes a lot of time and effort to do so. I know this because my parents have been working on developing our future home since I was 7. I am now a freshman in high school. While I don't fully understand why it is taking so long, my parents keep telling me they need to follow the rules and do things the right way, and that I just need to be patient. For those people just starting out, it sends a very clear message that if you want something that is not allowed and you are persistent in pushing to get it, then you will. Are those really the messages that you want to send to homeowners and developers, past and present? As I see things, the Town Council made a mistake in approving this project back in May. Each of you have very difficult and important jobs to do, and it is not easy to get everything right all the time. The people of the town of Los Gatos expect you to do the right thing, so I respectfully ask that you do so. Thank you.
Thank you, Ryan. I agree. It's nice to have a young person speaking, but I'm going to have to ask you not to clap. I appreciate it. Julie Donnelly.
Good evening, Madam Mayor and council members. I'm Julie Donnelly. I live at 16412 Peacock Lane. A lot has been said about the intent or spirit of the town's hillside development standards and guidelines. There are clearly two very different interpretations, those based on the words in the document itself and those based on the wishes of the applicant. It's pretty clear when you read the words that the town council made a mistake in approving the PD. I'm not against hillside or knoll development. In fact, I support it. But there has to be a basis to ensure consistency. Exceptions, if granted, ought to be reasonable and balanced, and as the rules say, only after carefully considering the constraints of the site. Obviously, if you design a house that can't fit in the hillside area, make a laundry list of exceptions so that it can. Alternately, you can go back to the drawing board and design the home to blend in with the constraints of the site as is prescribed in the rules. Basically, your approval of this PD said, don't design a home for the site, but instead grade the site as much as you need for the home that you want. Why do I care? My family is developing in the hillsides. We too own acreage, 15.3 acres to be exact, and contrary to comments about opposition living nowhere near, our property is within half a mile. We too have been working towards developing our family dream home. It's been 7 years. Why the delay? We chose to follow the rules, cooperate with the town, and not look for exceptions. Does money, whining, and a great team of lawyers and experts warrant exceptions to the written rules? Define unique situation. We too have kids who were 4, 5.5, and 7 when we started. Our children will know and understand the value of working hard and achieving a goal based on doing the right thing. They're now in middle school and high school. They have rules to follow at school and home and have a hard time understanding why Mr. DeSantis does not have to abide by the same rules we do. We too might have liked to have perimeter fencing or uplighting to our home and trees and acres of formal landscaping, a sports court, and a swimming pool on a hillside greater than 30%, but those items were not on the table for us. By approving this PD, you gave carte blanche. Please carefully consider the message this sends. Thank you.
Thomas Farito, followed by Mark Blackney, followed by Jack Farrow.
Mayor and members of the council, this year marks 30 years since the residents of Los Gatos, frustrated over inappropriate developments approved by a non-responsive planning commission and town council, began a movement dedicated to the election of candidates to the council committed to the creation and enforcement of development standards which would protect our hillsides and our neighborhoods. Significantly, since that time, no council candidate has been elected who has not claimed to have been in favor of such protections. While many have meant it, some have not. In recent years, a majority of the council has begun to abandon those protective standards, ignoring the pleas of its citizens, and approving developments using numerous ill-considered exceptions and exemptions to these standards. 9 days ago in the Ross Creek case, as in the DeSantis matter, wherein the town was sued for not requiring an EIR requested by interested citizens, a Santa Clara County Superior Court judge issued an order which held, quote, substantial evidence from any one qualified person in support of a fair argument that a project may have a significant impact on the environment in one or more of any number of ways, paren aesthetics, hydrology, etc., close paren, is enough to require the preparation of an EIR. Also, the court found the only evidence in the record consists of angry communications from the developer complaining of NIMBYs opposing their project and comments from town council members, apparently based upon the belief that members of the public expressing passionate advocacy are somehow inherently not credible. I urge you to respond favorably to the interested citizens who have raised in the DeSantis matter valid concerns about aesthetics, hydrology, and so on, and to uphold the most recent decision of the Planning Commission in this regard. Failure to do so would continue the litigation against the town and likely result in another costly legal defeat. Thank you.
Mark Blackney, followed by Jack Farrow.
Mark William Blakeney. I'm a Los Gatos homeowner. And a couple of points that I want to make sure that the town council understands with regards to the ANS decline is that, one, with regards to the fencing, Mr. DeSantis has left a majority of his space unfenced, and so I think that's a good sign that he's trying to do what he can to comply with the rules. Good point was brought up earlier with regards to the hydrology. However, the decline on the ANS had nothing to do with hydrology. In fact, it wasn't cited, so I'm not sure if that's actually a point of decision for tonight's town council meeting. I also want to point out something that really concerns me as a citizen of Los Gatos, which is with respect to Michael Kane. One of the things he has admitted that he attended a meeting of the Friends of the Hillside on June 12th. In addition, in his planned attempt to run for town council, he's released documents which show that he has, as commissioner for the Planning Commission, has received funds from Friends of the Hillside. As we know, the Brown Act prohibits discussion of projects outside of the hearing process. And, in fact, he himself asked the commission to recuse themselves if, in fact, they had had those conversations. And he has not, obviously, recused himself. I believe it's inappropriate and unethical for a member of the Planning Commission who's going to review a project to accept money and attend meetings from a group of people that are against that project. How can you make an objective opinion when you're taking money from the opposition? Thank you.
Thank you. Jack Ferone, followed by Phyllis Weber, and then Greg Cruz.
Hi, I'm Jack Ferone. I've been a Los Gatos homeowner for over 30 years and currently live directly across the Kennedy Road from the project. Nearly all parts of this project will be visible from various parts of my home and patio. And I strongly support the project, as do all the local property owners that I've spoken to. I think we need to be realistic here. That hill is not going to remain pristine forever. It may not be pristine now. Eventually it's going to be developed. And what Rob is proposing is superior to any reasonable plan that's going to happen to that hill. The project is greener, will use less water, pose a smaller impact to wildlife, will occupy a smaller total footprint, emit less light, and most important to me, when I look out my kitchen window, I'll see Rob's art studio as opposed to another 6,000 square foot home. Rob has tried to build a very green project, and he cited it to have minimal impact to the neighbors and given up all future development rights. It's the best alternative I can imagine, and urge you to listen to the neighbors and not some politically driven organization and approve, or whatever the current step is, the project tonight, and let Rob begin. Thank you.
Thank you. Phyllis Weber.
My name is Phyllis Weber. I live at 16140 Kennedy Road, which is directly across the street. And I was told that I'm the senior person here tonight. I don't know what that meant. Well, I think I do know what it meant. Anyway, I want to speak about neighborhood voice. There's maybe not all the people here tonight who are in support of it, but there are people who have been here before, and they're hoping that or trusting that you will remember it and do what's right for us. It's been previously discussed that the contour of the hill means that if there are two houses, one of them will surely be in the sight line, as that hill goes like this, and one of them will be right there, and it'll potentially have horse barns, courts, etc. Let us not imagine that anyone designing a second house on that property wouldn't want all the amenities that go with it. We can always talk about wildlife. I have 5 deer on my property every minute, chewing on my property, on my flowers, so forget that. A few aggressive folks who are not from the neighborhood have stirred up a storm where there should not be one. The town has worked closely with the DeSantis for an extended period of time, even to the point of applying more conditions. You've heard about this tonight, 117 conditions. Approval was given and then was taken away. I don't think that's usual, and it would appear that it was because of fear of a lawsuit. This is a well-rehearsed, well-organized group, and what their true purpose is, it's a question for me and others. The comments I hear is that there's a personal agenda in there somewhere. If the lawsuit proceeds, of course, there will be discovery, and matters of funding and purpose will come out. When this project came before the Planning Commission for review, the attitude seemed to be that Mr. DeSantis was the enemy, when in fact this project will be a great addition to our town. I doubt that. Thank you. I'm just strongly in favor of this. Thank you.
Thank you. Greg Cruz, followed by Bernadette Chadwick.
Hello, my name is Greg Cruz, and I live on Farley Road. I just moved to Los Gatos this April, and as a new member of the community, I must tell you how absolutely shocked and disappointed I am on how the city government has handled themselves in this manner. If you open up the Los Gatos Weekly Times, you cannot miss the articles about the DeSantis project. Reading these articles makes it seem as if we have our own television drama going on right here in Los Gatos. And it's my observation over the past few months that 3 issues have jumped out at me. My first issue as a homeowner is that I'm concerned about my future property value, and I hope that potential buyers who might be interested in remodeling never hear about the process that Mr. DeSantis has went through. I know I would think twice about buying in Los Gatos if that were my situation. 4 years of working with town leaders and his neighbors to come up with a collaborative design that is acceptable to all. When I see the hoops that Mr. DeSantis has had to go through to get this approval, I begin to really wonder about an abuse of power, or is this just an abusive process? What kind of reputation does this leave Los Gatos with? The second thing that caught my eye was the headline that the DeSantis project will become a decisive issue in the upcoming city council campaign. How sad is that? How about focusing on issues that impact the daily lives of a larger cross-section of residents of the town, like economic development, public safety, and social programs? And finally, what about the Friends of the Hillside? They are not Friends of the Hillside, but only out there to attack Mr. DeSantis and his family. I find that absolutely despicable. This man is not a criminal. He is doing nothing wrong. And to engage in a personal smear campaign against someone for wanting to build a house on land that he owns is low and should not be tolerated in our community. I personally cannot support these tactics, nor any candidate that does. Let's stop abusing the process, Mr. DeSantis and his family, and let's get the town government focused on issues that are going to make Los Gatos stronger economically, socially, and politically. Thank you.
Thank you. Bernadette Chadwick, followed by Howard Spinner.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Bernadette Chadwick. I live at 220 Wooded View Drive, Los Gatos, and we are across the valley from Mr. DeSantis' property, and I have a picture here. This is taken from my front deck, and we look directly out at the full length of the property. So we were interested, I've lived there 22 years. We were interested if that was ever going to be developed, and we thought, well, for sure we'll know when it is, and we would see the story poles come up. And so we have watched over the years. And I was surprised that it was all planned and there were no story poles, so I was interested in coming to find out more about it. I also wanted to say that I have been here years ago whenever the end of Wooded View Drive was being developed into 4 lots at the very top of the hill, and 4 very good applicants made their homes, and they came before the Planning Commission, and they were all, well, the first 2 were turned down because the homes were too big and they were cutting too many trees and digging too much. So they came before the council, and 2 of the people on the council tonight were part of the people who rejected their applications and sent them back to the Planning Commission. And so they replanned their homes, and they kept within the guidelines, and they built their homes. And one was on a property that was almost the size of Mr. DeSantis' property. And the other applicant decided, well, I better just go with the hillside plan. So Mr. Fletcher built his house and the neighbor's house. And all 4 homes are beautiful. They are within the guidelines. And we just think that it looks better whenever everything is kept within the rules of the guidelines. So I just wanted you to know that.
Thank you. Howard Spinner, followed by Julia Raskol.
My name's Howard Spinner. I live at 16158 Kennedy Road in Los Gatos. I've been a Los Gatos resident for 20 years, and I've been reading the Los Gatos Weekly myself over the last couple of years. I'm a neighbor of Mr. DeSantis. I've run into him a couple of times walking my dog and briefly meeting him. My feeling is if an agreement was made, a decision was reached to approve this, It seems to me as though what's happening, someone else alluded to it earlier, that there must be some bowing to pressure from the opposition. And, I think that the council and all here needs to stand behind your decision. I support his ability to create such a beautiful property. When you look at that compared to two other houses, I think that's a clear winner. And, I think that a final decision had been made. I think that final decision needs to be, obviously, it needs to be remade here since it's going under appeal, and I think it just needs to be final. I think the dust is going to settle. However, it's going to settle legally, whether the decision is made or not. So let's take a stand, stick up for what you've already decided on, and let's go forward. A quick statement about coyotes. Coyotes are, they're pretty intense. So, when he has young children, he should have a security fence. Anyone's been living around coyotes and you hear the screams. They sound like dying babies over here and over here and over here. And he should have security fencing. There's no doubt about that. Sounds like he's made some compromises and on all of that. And I think I want to recognize him for his persistence. And he should be out creating jobs. That's what he does. He creates jobs for this economy. He should be there focusing his attention on that. Thank you very much.
Julia? Raiskel?
Madam Mayor, council members, good evening. My name is Julia Rasecki, and I own the home at 16621 Kennedy Road. I'm here...
Get closer to the microphone.
Is that better?
Yes.
Okay. I live at 16621 Kennedy Road, and I'm here in support of Mr. DeSantis's project. I'm aware also that there has been extra consideration also for the traffic on Kennedy Road and taking into consideration the safety of the people that reside on Kennedy Road as a part of the permit. What I am here to discuss also as a part of that is the consideration for sidewalks and stop signs to also be put in on Kennedy Road as our town continues to develop. And as earlier this evening was addressed, that there is sidewalks being put in on Blossom Hill, for the sake of the safety of the residents on Kennedy Road, to address that as well in the near future so we can continue to develop and prosper as a community and grow together. And also I'm here as a member of the Citizens of Safety for Kennedy Road.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Paul Quintana, then Darren Carroll, then David Weisman.
My name is Paul Quintana. I live at 5 Palm Avenue, and I have lived here for 35 years. I have a son who also attended all of Los Gatos schools after graduating from Los Gatos High School. And so I have been involved with this town and have concerns about it. I have concerns of what happens across the street from me. I have concerns what happens down the street from me. I have concerns what happens across town, and I have concerns of what happens on the hillside. I do not live on the hillside. I live at 5 Palm Avenue. Somehow, that doesn't give me any credibility to have concerns for this town, and I would like to reject that premise immediately. I did want to come and speak about the fence, that security fence that was voted against by the Planning Commission. As you know, this project, as we've been told many times, it's gone on for 4 years. And suddenly, several weeks ago, all of a sudden it became obvious that a security fence was needed. It's striking that an individual would have this kind of property in the hillside and not know there were coyotes there, and only now are we worried about a security fence. I agree that there is a need. I agree that one should be concerned. I am suspicious of the motivation, how it suddenly came about. Also, he talks about, Mr. DeSantis, about the wildlife and the corridors and the movement. I had asked the council before to see the biology report that talked about the trees, the plants, the wildlife movement, the number of wildlife that might be affected. And as far as I know, there has been never a biologic report, an environmental type impact report like this. So I don't know where these numbers come from. I'm not sure. I assume Mr. DeSantis has a consultant. Maybe it's somebody on the planning department, or maybe it's himself, but I haven't seen an official report as yet, as many have not seen on many other issues. Also, the fence is within 400, this is a security fence, which is not an open-style fence, and it's within 400 feet of the property line. I understand that that is against the CCNR for the 16 lots that this is part of the original subdivision. And so, again, I would like to encourage you to do what's right.
Thank you. Darren Carroll and then David Weissman.
Good evening. My name is Darren Carroll. I live at 546 San Benito Avenue. Excuse me. I'm here tonight to request that the Town Council grants the DeSantis family final approval to build their home. I find it very unsettling that anyone would have to be put to such a tremendous amount of time and money into getting such site and architectural approval for their home, only to be faced with a planning commission that does not follow or give direction. It's my understanding that the Planning Commission was instructed by the Town Council to address only landscape, drainage, and fencing items. Yet bulk, mass, and roofing materials were frequently discussed at the last meeting and used as reasons to deny the project approval, all items that were previously reviewed and approved. It's appalling that the DeSantis family or anyone else wanting to build a home in this community would be confronted by opposition with name-calling, accusations, and derogatory comments. A person's financial standings, real estate holdings, or length of residence in this town should not be a factor or even allowed into discussion when reviewing an application for a home. What anyone needs or wants is purely individual and subjective, and as long as the town's governing bodies believe that an application is within the town codes, guidelines, and ordinances, which do allow for variances, the applicant should be able to proceed. I don't think I'm going to have time here. I praise Mr. DeSantis for his patience, persistence, and willingness to jump through many hoops that have been placed in front of him, and please make tonight the last hoop that he has to jump through and approve his home.
You did it. Thank you.
Excuse me?
You did it. Thank you. Before your time was up. David Weissman, Jorge Silva.
Dave Weissman, Francis Oaks Way. I want once again to address the issue of subdivision. Why? Because the applicant continues to throw out the threat of subdivision if his project is denied. So, permit me to repeat the facts. In 1978, when the Maslissa 40-acre subdivision was approved, 16 lots were authorized. The town specified in 3 different documents and memos, and Maslissa agreed that future subdivision was not permitted. Is that absolutely the last word? Well, theoretically, no. The town council could authorize a subdivision, just as they could authorize a Home Depot on the Yuki North 40. And hell could also freeze over. But is a DeSantis subdivision realistic given the following facts? There is only one building site unless massive amounts of grading are done. There is minimal community benefit since the majority of designated open space is on slopes greater than 30% and couldn't be built on anyway. Mr. DeSantis spoke of a cul-de-sac of death. One of the conditions of approval of the 1978 subdivision required that fencing to be of an open-style nature within 400 feet of the rear property line of all 16 properties. The proposed non-open-style security fence is located 150 feet from the rear property line and is thus prohibited.
Thank you. Jorge Silva. Jarja Silva. All right. No one's coming forward. Tom Gogan, who will be followed by Eric Morley.
Wow. Thank you, Madam Mayor. And I represent a group called Concerned Citizens for a Safer Kennedy Road. We were here a couple weeks ago. For the past 7 years, we've been petitioning that the town do something to mitigate the traffic problems we've been experiencing on Kennedy Road. We held a town or a neighborhood meeting recently, and I'd like to recognize Joe and Todd. I got it right in front of me. Todd Caperso for attending the meeting. We had outstanding turnout from the neighborhood. To this effect, I want to point out that this group of us, we are not anti-development, and in fact, if anything, we're pro-development. A number of us have projects either in the town or or approved by the town. I have surveyed the members of this group, and they are generally supportive, if not enthusiastic, about this project. We are concerned about traffic on the road. We feel that Mr. DeSantis, and we feel very confident that he will manage the related traffic accordingly. We are much more concerned about the town doing its part. And for the past 7 years, we have been lobbying the town to put sidewalks in, to reduce the speed limits, and to put three-way stop signs on major intersections that we've noted as dangerous along a stretch of road of Kennedy Road from Los Gatos Boulevard to Stony Brook. We still look for the town to do that. It's been 7 years since we've been involved. It's been 4 years since Mr. DeSantis began his project. The town has had ample opportunity to address our concerns and has chosen not to. So we find it outrageous that the town is spending so much time, that there is a Friends of the Hillside. Where are the friends of the 50 children that live on Kennedy Road, that walk to school every day along a stretch of road that has 30-mile-an-hour speed limits instead of 25, that does not have sidewalks to protect them and provide them safe passage to the school at the end of the street, so forth. So I question the priorities of the town itself to dedicate so much time to this, as opposed to just getting over it, approving the project, moving on, and helping us with our safety considerations.
Eric Morley, followed by Dick Conrad and Lee Quintana.
Good evening, Mayor Spector and council members. My name is Eric Morley, 16322 Lilac Lane in the town of Los Gatos. I'm here this evening to support the appeal. As you know, I've spoken to you before on this project. I've been following it for a number of years. And as I've indicated before, as a real estate developer, it's clear that the highest and best use for this property is clearly subdivision. Clearly the most environmental damage and destruction is as a result of that as well. And Mr. DeSantis has given up what is best for him financially in order to do what's best for both the town, his neighbors, the environment, and his family. A plan that's been supported by every single one of his adjacent neighbors and 55 surrounding neighbors. And most importantly, and what's before the council this evening, is that the ANS application that's before you in the appeal is specifically consistent with the PD zoning that was approved by the council. And I also wanted to say, as a 30-year resident of Los Gatos, like many other folks here, is that I am concerned, too, about the tone and the tenor and the rancor that has been created around this project. And as we raise our children in this community, we teach them that we may not agree, we may not always win, but we always respect one another. So I would ask that everyone in this process respect each other in the council and the balance of the speakers, and that no applicant should be treated in a way that this applicant has been treated. And I would encourage the town to be harsh and rigorous and tough, but fair, and would encourage you to approve the plan this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Dick Conrad, Lee Quintana, and Lynn Williams.
Hi, my name is Dick Conrad. I live at 86 Fairview Plaza. My concern is both town and hillside beautification, and as I look up into the hillsides and I see all those prison-looking like structures, I'm convinced that the hillside guidelines should be firm guidelines, and I would hope that we continue to hold them as firm guidelines. I'm concerned about a couple things. One is the precedent set by this. Once we relax hillsides, everything is going to be a negotiation from here on out, and this will not be the first. And if we want to not have continuous meetings like this, we should make our hillside guidelines firm guidelines. Second thing, I'm concerned about big money buying their way into the community and the potential impact of that. Thirdly, I'm really concerned about our commitment to sustainability. Sustainability, the enemy of sustainability is excessive consumption. And there's nothing that I've seen in the community that has more of a conspicuous consumption aspect than this project. Thank you.
Thank you. Lee Quintana and then Lynn Williams.
First off, I'd like to say that from the very beginning, me and the friends who I am one of the friends of the hillside. From the very beginning, we did not say we were opposed to development on the DeSantis site. We simply said we wanted whatever development that was going to be built there to be consistent with the town's hillside standards and various other regulations. With respect to what is being covered on the ANS today, and for PDs in general, my experience has been, and I sat as a planning commissioner for 8 years, so I think I have a fairly good memory. Most PDs came before us with fairly detailed architectural plans. Most of them had story poles put up either at the PD stage or the ANS stage. Most of them came to the Planning Commission for full review of ANS. This project somehow is being treated differently in that respect. Another point I'd like to make is that in your packet you have no verbatim transcript for the August 13th meeting of the Planning Commission, and I think you don't have a full flavor of what was said, what went on, and the rationale and reasonings of both the public, the Planning Commission, and Mr. DeSantos. In addition to that, I'd like to say that the ANS conditions of approval have numerous new conditions with respect to defensible space and the wildlife urban interface, fire department requirements. They say they will be met. However, the question is, are they met now? Have the landscaping plans been reviewed to see if the establishment of defensible space will require removal of any more trees or endanger any more trees? And a lot of other questions along that line.
Thank you. Lynn Williams and then Bridget Morton. Lynn Williams. All right. Then we'll have Bridget Morton followed by Arlie Middlebrook.
Good evening. My name is Bridget Morton. I live at 120 Cardinal Lane. And this is addressing the animal survey and fencing and the lighting. Mr. DeSantos himself told the Planning Commission at the last meeting that he has seen all kinds of wildlife on his site. This is the only wildlife survey that we have. So given that biodiversity is important to know, I now ask the following questions. What are the preferred animal movement paths on the site, and how will they be affected by the proposed development? These are not trivial questions, since the newly proposed security fence will isolate most of the flatter portions of the site, leaving only steep slopes for animal movement, certainly not their preferred routes. We have a lighting plan of sorts that shows which 36 trees will have lights on them, but we don't know if these lights will be on timers, be infrared activated, will they affect the nocturnally active animals on the site, and etc. And how are we supposed to know these answers without a complete animal study? With no offense intended toward Mr. DeSantis for his thorough wildlife analysis, we don't want the whole hillside lit up at night, even with down-facing lights, if they are mounted high in these 36 trees. We hope that a deed restriction should be required regarding future fencing and lighting, so that once an occupancy permit is issued, no further fencing and lighting are constructed anywhere on this site. Thank you.
Thank you. Arlie Middlebrook.
Hi, my name is Ellery Middlebrook. I live at 140 Wissahickon Avenue in Los Gatos. And I'm a design professional. I specialize in sustainable landscaping and also work as a consultant to different cities on sustainable development, specifically related to landscaping, watershed management. So I'd just like to speak about how I see the project and how I would handle the project if I were working on it. I think one of the issues here is that there is so much more information about watershed management and protection available today than when this project was first presented, or even when your last ruling by council was made. even in my own practice, the knowledge that I have today and how I decide how I'm going to design a landscape in a remote area like this that does impact wildlife and that doesn't impact watershed management, that does impact drainage, that does impact stormwater. There is so much more information that we have available to us. And I believe that as elected officials, it's your responsibility to be as up on the information as you can be. And the things that concern me about this project is how it affects the overall water quality of the citizens of the area, including the drinking water. Is there a watershed management plan? And is there a watershed management plan designated by the county? Because watershed management has changed so much, so quickly, because of our knowledge of local ecology. I'm concerned about the great quantity of impervious surfaces and what this will do in terms of affecting the watershed, altering the natural drainage patterns, what happens with the runoff, the displacement of many tons of existing site soil as this affects natural wildlife habitat, as well as the residents who live at lower elevations. There are so many specific things.
Thank you. All right, I have no other cards. I'd ask that cards be submitted prior to the beginning of the public testimony. I have no other cards, and so at this time, I am going to close the public hearing. We've been going for a few hours, and so we will now take a break until... Oh, that's really good. This is why we have a vice mayor. Keeps the mayor honest. Before we have a break, Mr. DeSantis, you have 5 minutes to do your rebuttal.
I thought we'd get in after the break, but oh well. Anyway, let's start off with, distortions of the truth. I want to give a couple of different themes here for in the last couple of minutes here. Grading, the amount of grading, trucks, fencing, lighting. I mean, some of these distortions that the community hears, as well as you. I know all of you have gotten the truth and you've gotten the information from planning and whatnot, but for the community watching, there are so many distortions that I apologize that you have to go through this. The second thing is nomenclature. The word hydrology was defined to me for my project by a planning commissioner. The planning commissioner said, Rob, what about the hydrology analysis? And what? She says, how much water is your plant's going to drink? I'm like, okay. So that's the definition of hydrology. Was I set up because there's some legal word associated with hydrology? And Mr. DeSantis doesn't need hydrology? I find that very interesting that all of a sudden this came up. The SWIP, or whatever you call it, the erosion control plan, the permits, and the 73 conditions, all of those things have been addressed. We need the SWIP before we start grading, but not before the nomenclature. The 73 conditions, if we met every 73 conditions, one of them would say you'd be issuing me an occupancy permit before we started the grading. So clearly, the attorney needs to check the nomenclature to understand what the 73 conditions meant. But again, public opinion. Perspective. Let's put this in perspective. 13.7 acres. We're talking about, for landscaping, 10 to 15%. Less than 2 acres, closer to like 1 acre of stuff, and half of that is going to be natural, drought-tolerant stuff. So how can we be talking about on this acre of stuff, what's going to be going into my 13.7 acres of land? It's no different than anyone else who's doing irrigation. The Donnelly family. I love the Donnelly family. I see them every time we've gotten to know each other from observations. But did they give up their development rights? Did they create an open space easement? Did they call 55 neighbors and get their signed support? Did they come to the town prior to all the stuff and get all the stuff done? I wish them well. I hope they get what they want. I understand their pain. I really do. And I admire them for bringing their son out. I think that's a great educational thing to do. Land use subdivision, that was fully vetted before we even started this project. And if there's one thing that I have the resources for is to find out, good lawyers, to find out if I really do have the legal right to subdivide. Otherwise, why would I have even brought it up? I'm not a corrupt person, and I'm not out to I've never made anything in life by trying to fool an opposition. When I was approved back in May, me and a few people went and we celebrated, just to share with the type of people, these friends of the hillside. And I walked up to them, I saw them all, funny enough, they all went to the same place down the road here to enjoy a cocktail. And I went to them and I said, you know what, we were on opposite sides tonight, but let's at least toast each other to the passion of Los Gatos. And all I could get from Miss Decker and her group were catcalls, yelling at me, you don't love Los Gatos, all these negative things. And I thought, is that something we're proud of? Are these friends of the hillside? Are these the people we want to be around? So, those are some of the things I saw. But to date, the collaboration has been positive. The expense, time, and personal attacks, however, have not been. My home has been studied by more people in more ways than anyone has imagined. It has taken a toll on my family and is anything but fun. Of course, more people would like some more studies tonight. We started this endeavor shortly after our daughter was born. 2 weeks ago, my baby daughter started kindergarten. We are now looking at completing our home 3 years from now. By then, half of her childhood will have been gone. I would now like to move to the next stage that can hopefully be family-focused and enjoy creating our family home. Somehow, over the 4.5 years, the enjoyment for the family focus has disappeared, and now it's time to return. The ANS application before you tonight is consistent in every way with the approved PD. I'm not sure the agenda of Friends of the Hillside, but please approve my ANS application tonight.
Thank you. Questions for Mr. DeSantis? Seeing none, thank you. We'll now close the public hearing, and we will take a break until the clock, using the clock up there, 20 of. Thank you. I'm calling the meeting back to order. If staff and council will take their seat, the members in the audience will sit down and quiet down, please. And I'll ask staff if they would please close the back doors. This always sounds like such a festive place when I have people take a break. All right, now what I'm going to do is ask staff to walk us through the process of when we get to making motions. Mr. Larson, I understand you're going to do that?
Yes, Madam Mayor, members of the council, ladies and gentlemen. As recommended in the staff report, given the attention and focus on this case, we have separated the potential council actions for clarity purposes. And the first recommended action would be to take a motion on either denying the appeal or granting the appeal that was brought forward by the applicant, Appellant DeSantis, and there are stated council policy criteria for granting an appeal. Those are listed on page 2 of the staff report and projected on the screen here for the public's consideration. And then depending on your action on granting or denying the appeal, there may or may not be subsequent action appropriate for the council.
Thank you. Do we have questions of Mr. Larson? All right, that's great. So where we are now is we are going to try and start out with a motion on granting or denying the appeal. And so I will look to my colleagues up here on the dais to start this off. Ms. McNutt.
Mayor, actually, I had a couple of questions I wanted to ask of staff as follow-up from the public testimony.
That's a really good idea.
Tom?
Go ahead.
So 2 questions for Mr. Lawrence. The first is a question on the stormwater plan that somebody brought up, and I've already lost track of who that was. If you could give us a report on what the status is on that. And the second question, which wasn't asked by the public, but it occurred to me, is when typically do the list of specific plants that are planned for the landscape plan get submitted to the town?
First question first. This PD is a little unusual in that there are 2 grading approvals allowed. It's a phased grading and then a final grading, or a rough grading, as some people refer to it, is the first phase, and then final grading would be subsequent to that. And the SWIP, the Stormwater Pollution Prevention Plan, will be completed before any stripping of earth or earth movement is done. We have reviewed a rough draft of that, and that will be submitted to the Regional Water Quality Control Board before any earth movement occurs. Then in terms of when do the plants get detailed out, we do not look at the final landscape plan of the ornamental landscape areas. For example, what kinds of plants someone is choosing to plant within the ornamental landscape areas are left to them. We do look at the irrigation plans for those areas, required drip irrigation, that sort of thing. But for the areas outside of the ornamental landscaping, we do review the species plant palette to make sure they're in the approved list of native plants that are approved as part of the hillside standards and guidelines. And that would happen before issuance of a grading or a building permit.
Let me follow up on that, Mr. Lortz. The PD Condition 6 says the landscape plan shall be received, reviewed, and approved with the ANS application, and the Planning Commission asked to look at the type of plants, to confirm that there were no invasive species and irrigation. Are you saying that the request that the Planning Commission made as part of his motion is inconsistent with the PD, number 6?
I believe it's premature to the issuance of the building permit. I think it's premature to have that level of detail at architecture and site approval, other than what is required to make sure that the palette of plants has to comply with the hillside standards. That's a condition of approval. So the detailed plants that he's going to include as part of the more natural areas will be reviewed prior to the issuance of a building permit and has to comply with the hillside standards. That's a condition of approval.
Further questions? Mr. Glickman.
Thank you very much. Clarification on process. It's my understanding that should the council uphold an appeal, and I thank the town manager and the director of community development for putting those the options we've given ourselves under which we can do that on the overhead. And I hope everyone on home watching this on TV can see that. It's my recollection and understanding that if we opt for the reason for upholding the appeal is new information, then it's been our policy that then goes back to the Planning Commission. Is that correct?
Madam Mayor, members of the council, that is the intended direction according to Section 29-2300, unless the additional information is not substantial or significant to the application.
Very good. That in fact was my understanding, and I think I recall having asked the same question and gotten the same answer at a previous council meeting. That being the case, should the council, for any of those three reasons, uphold the appeal, let me just put this as bluntly as possible, is that the end of it? In other words, should we uphold the appeal, are the next steps involve either the council or the Planning Commission, or could you sort of tell us, should we uphold the appeal, where this project goes from there?
It is staff's recommendation that should the appeal be granted or upheld, that then it is the council's discretion to decide as a secondary, as a follow-up action, whether it was based on new information and remand the case back to the Planning Commission, or if it was based on the first or third condition or not significant new information, in which case the ANS is before the council for adoption as you so direct.
So, if I understand the answer, in that case, in terms of the council, Planning Commission process, that would not be a part of it, that we would move forward through a staff implementation of the direction given by council. Is that correct?
Let me just make sure that this is clear. If council's decision is to grant the appeal and to approve the project, then at that point the decision is final, with the exception of any subsequent findings that need to be made in relation to the decision, and then staff follows through. If council wishes to grant the appeal and approve the project with new conditions, then that might change things. You do have some discretion, but remember that discretion is only limited to those issues that have not been already discussed and approved in the PD.
Good questions. Further questions? We have a motion.
Go.
Mr. Wasserman has a green light on. Mr. Wasserman.
It's kind of interesting. There's, I think, 35 people, 36 people that spoke this evening, keeping track of names and positions, and many faces I recognized, many faces I didn't. But out of the 35 people, there were 3 or 4 people that actually addressed the issue that was before us tonight. I understand the passion from everyone else. in support and against the project itself. Some people like the fact council approved it back in May, and some people don't like the fact council approved it back in May. But council majority, therefore the council, approved the PD back in May, and that's where things are. What's before us tonight is the architecture and site issues, as I understand it, from staff and our attorney and everything else, my own personal research. Given that, I looked at what the Planning Commission discussed and considered and all the input and feedback they had, and it was 4-3. I mean, council was 3-2, Planning Commission was 4-3. I mean, none of these things were 5-0, 7-zip, slam dunks. I can't find, Planning Commission chose to turn it down, the applicant chose to appeal it. I can't find any of those findings in order to overturn the Planning Commission's decision. One person spoke this evening. I've got so many names here, they all kind of blur together now, no offense. Somebody mentioned process. A young person mentioned following the rules. We have a Planning Commission that was assigned to review the architecture and site that had not been considered and approved in the PD. It was very few things, with some lighting, some fencing, some irrigation, I think, hydro, whatever you said, Rob. Those were issues that were before the Planning Commission. They weren't satisfied, a majority of them weren't satisfied with the information they received on those items. And so by a slim but majority, they said, we're not approving the A&S at this point because we're not satisfied with certain issues regarding the security fencing and the landscaping. I've heard tonight issues brought up about 400 feet from the rear property line, 100 feet from the rear property line. It seems to me there's some unresolved issues regarding the A&S that was put before the Planning Commission, whatever it was, a month ago. And our Planning Commission said we're not comfortable with that, so we're not approving them as they are. And I think what they're looking for is further discussion, further information. So the applicant chose to appeal, which is everyone's right. And I for one, don't find the findings necessary to overturn what the Planning Commission. I understand those that voted against it. I understand their concerns and their confusion. What I think as far as the process, as far as how the system should work, I personally am not in favor of granting the appeal. I think it should go back to Planning Commission. I think the applicant and the Planning Commission should work out these issues. That's how our system works. We're not going back to ground square one. Sorry, I've got ground zero on from 9/11. Square one on that's not what we're saying. What's before council tonight is architecture and site. It covers 4 or 5 things that's in the report. I, for one, think, since I don't think the Planning Commission erred, I think it should go back to Planning Commission, and those issues should be worked out. I did want to comment on a couple of items that were brought up by some people tonight. They talked about how long this process has taken. One gentleman has been here 4 to 5 months. One person's been here 20 years. The reason the item took so long was it was a planned development. The reason the item took, this is my personal speaking, one council person only. That's the disclaimer we have to give. It took so long because A, it was a planned development, B, it's a unique piece of property, a unique condition, and C, there was 4 exceptions to the hillside guidelines. So they had to go through a lot of hoops and such to get there. I've talked to Mr. Lortz in my 6 short years on council, which have just flown by. 99 out of 100 permits that are requested and granted are done so over the counter. They go right on through. Okay? But what you hear about in the paper, what you hear about wherever, are the ones that are the unique ones, the ones that come before us. I've often said issues that come to council are the gray ones. They're not the black and white. They're not simple. Okay? There's 50 people here that chose to miss Monday Night Football in favor of this project. There's 50 people here that are against it. Okay? It's not a clear-cut deal. It wasn't clear-cut for Planning Commission. It's not. Where we are now, though, is A&S. So, Madam Mayor, I'll try and focus. I make a motion that the appeal is denied and recommend it go back, because I cannot make the findings that Planning Commission erred, and recommend that it go back to Planning Commission for those few items to be worked out.
We have a motion that the appeal be denied and that the remaining items go back to the Planning Commission to be worked out, and I will identify that those items to be the planting plan and the security fence. Is there a second? The chair will second. Discussion. The chair will discuss. The first thing is that whether you were for it or whether you were against it, and Mr. Wasserman is correct, you're coming down just about 50-50. Most of you talked about the plan development, and that you either thought it was a great plan development and you approved what the council did, or you were against it. So the first thing I want to say is that I voted against that plan development, but that is our law now. And so to the extent that that plan development has made decisions, that's done. And so I'm not going to waste any of our time and talk about the plan development. It's our law, it's in court, it's done. The second thing is, and this issue came up if you read the transcripts or watched the hearing of the Planning Commission, they asked for direction from the council, should there ever be any architecture and site like this being sent to them again. Well, I will tell you right now, this was very unusual. I've never seen anything like it. I did not anticipate when the plan development was approved and A&S Architecture and Site was going back to the Planning Commission that the road that they would have to walk down would be so narrow and so defined. I certainly understand it now, but I did not understand it back in May when this council adopted the plan development. Therefore, what I'm looking at tonight is is there a basis under our rules, our law, for granting the appeal? And I don't see one. I can understand why 4 people on the Planning Commission voted against it. I can understand why 3 people on the Planning Commission voted against it. I understand that. And if I were on the Planning Commission, quite frankly, who knows what I would have done. But I'm not. I'm on the council, and I'm looking at what the Planning Commission did. And given what they did and what they based it on, I don't find a basis under what we have to follow to overturn them. And so, therefore, I am supporting Mr. Wasserman's motion. Further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor? Aye. Opposed?
No.
All right, the motion fails 3-2 with Mr. Wasserman and Ms. Spector voting in favor of the motion. Do I have another motion? Mr. Glickman.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm going to make a motion to uphold the appeal. I will not make it on the basis of new information because I don't believe that that's the facts on the ground before us. So I look at the question of whether the Planning Commission erred or abused their discretion, or whether it was a policy issue over which the Planning Commission did not have discretion. And almost always, and I've been doing this now for 8 years, I don't remember that we've ever said that we chose number 1, but I'm going to do it this time. Now, the grounds on which we do it, I'm going to tread delicately. It is well within the purview of this council to disagree with the Planning Commission. It is well within the purview of this council to look at the issues that they raise, the factual issues, the issues concerning hydrology, the issues concerning landscaping, the issues concerning fencing, the issues concerning copper, and say, I'm sorry, that at our level, looking at those issues, were not appropriate to deny the A&S application. We can do that. Abuse of discretion is a far stronger issue. And in my view, sometimes it almost requires mind reading. I will tell you that I watched that Planning Commission hearing very carefully. And I certainly come to my attention, especially tonight, a number of other people were very concerned about what they saw. However, I don't think we need to discuss that at this moment. I think that it is well within the scope of our appropriate discretion to say that we don't agree with the Planning Commission, that the elements of the A&S application upon our review are adequate and it can be approved. Madam Mayor, I'm going to reserve the opportunity to discuss some of the other issues while this is still before us, but I think right now the motion I want to make is that, and again, this is not a pejorative motion, that the council on this issue does not agree with the Planning Commission, and in that sense it erred, and that therefore I'm going to move to uphold the appeal.
All right, we have a motion by Mr. Glickman to uphold, I'll use the word grant the appeal on the basis that the Planning Commission erred. Do we have a second? All right, the motion dies for lack of second. Do we have another motion? Ms. McNutt, jump into the fray.
Yeah, sure. So I will make a motion to grant the appeal, but on the basis of number 3, the policy over which Planning Commission did not have discretion. And I was hesitating on Mr. Glickman's motion because I do feel that the Planning Commission made a mistake, but I think the situation is so unusual and it was so confusing that it was easy to see how they went down that road. And the reason that I'm saying that it's policy is because most of what was being questioned is covered in the PD, which is a policy decision that's already been made. So let me stop there. See if I get a second.
I'll second it.
All right, we have a motion by Ms. McNutt, seconded by Mr. Brzezinski, to grant the appeal based on an issue of policy over which Planning Commission did not have discretion. Further discussion. Ms. McNutt, did you have further?
Actually, no, I think all my other comments are going to relate to Part 2 if this motion passes.
Further discussion. All right, seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? No. Passes 3-2. The no votes, Wasserman and Spector. Ms. McNutt, did you want to?
Well, wait, do we we're going to do the process for the next part, or no? The manager wants to say something, I think.
Yes, Mr. Larson.
Madam Mayor, members of the council, given the granting of the appeal by a majority vote of the council, the options before you are to deal with the A&S yourself as you so choose, to grant the A&S, to condition the A&S within the constraints of your prior plan development approval. So you're faced with the same task now that the Planning Commission had, that you just basically upheld the appeal of their prior decision. You also have the discretion to remand the item, if you so chose, back to the Planning Commission with direction. So you have virtually total discretion within the constraint of your prior plan development.
All right, yes, with this motion, it's open, except for items already covered by the PD. It could be as simple, I'm looking now at page 2, it could be as simple as just saying that you're going to go to the findings on attachment 1, or you can start modifying things. Or do we have any other motions at this point? Mr. Brzezinski.
Madam Mayor, I think that it now behooves us to make the findings on page 8 of the staff report.
Is that a motion?
I think we would make 4 different findings if that's the case.
I see Mr. Brzezinski going to page 2, paragraph 3. Is that correct? Mr. Larson is shaking his head yes?
Well,
yes.
Yes. Those conditions concerned approval of the project. You've granted the appeal. If you're going to approve the project, those are the findings that need to be made. And when I say project, I mean the application.
Right. All right. And do I understand you, Mr. Brzezinski, that you are going to make the findings under paragraph 3, page 2?
Well, we can do that. I'm looking for the extended findings on page 8.
Madam Mayor, sorry, I did not clarify this earlier. The elaboration of numbered item 3 on page 2 comes at the bottom of page 8 with items number 1 through 4, which then also reference attachment 2, which is the full detailing of conditions that were previously presented on this project.
All right, Mr. Przinski, go for it.
Yes, before I start those motions, however, Madam Mayor, I would just like to say that my support for the motion of Ms. McNutt on the basis of policy over which the Planning Commission did not have discretion was reinforced by my own observation of the deliberation of the Planning Commission, and I think the very difficult position they felt themselves in, wherein they were attempting to make discovery in areas that on face value didn't seem apparent to them within the conditions of approval, but as I look at the conditions, I think they were there. For example, I'll use the security fence issue. There are 2 different conditions of approval, one of which talked about landscaping 30 feet from the structures. The other condition talked about security fence. The fact that they were not melded into the same condition, I think, was the thing that confused the Planning Commission. And I found that in each of the objections raised by the Planning Commission. So to me, it was more a procedural issue rather than that was based on some confusion of a very complicated task on their part. I think that the applicant has sufficiently answered each of the questions raised by the Commission. As I reread the Hillside Standards today, I couldn't tell you how many times now, it's really clear to me that the standards were fulfilled in this particular approval if you read the standards accurately. And I'm not going to go into detail, but I do think that a clear and analytic reading of the standards does indicate for the fulfillment of the standards by the applicant, and the approval by the council majority was appropriate. In that set of standards, there's a very detailed list of appropriate plants for the habitat that we're looking at in that particular site, and the assumption is if the applicant fulfills the expectation of the Hillside Standards as regards plant palette, then we will have exactly what the Planning Commission was requesting. So it's embedded in both the plan and it's embedded in the Hillside Standards, and therefore I think that in my evaluation over the last week and a half or so, I appreciated the Planning Commission's raising these issues. I think that it allowed me to do another evaluation of what the issues were directing toward, and the conclusion I drew was that indeed those answers are available to us, and that the plan development can go forward because it fulfills those expectations. Therefore, I would like to find that the project is consistent with Plan Development Ordinance 2162, find that the project is consistent with the Hillside Specific Plan and Hillside Developmental Standards and Guidelines, find that the project is consistent with the considerations for approval of architecture and site applications, and that's as indicated in attachment 1 in the staff report, and then move to approve architecture and site application S0855 subject to the conditions in Exhibit 2 as shown in the development plans attachment 3, and fencing, lighting, and landscape plans attachments 4 and 5 as submitted to us by staff. That's my motion.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
Second.
All right, we have a motion by Mr. Przinski. I'm not going to repeat it all. It is found on
Page 8.
Page 8, bottom of page 8 of our staff report. It is seconded by Ms. McNutt. And the reason I am not supporting this is because, again, I think that there were facts before the Planning Commission that supported the majority vote. I could also have seen a motion whereby the security fence and the plantings would be just 2 elements that go back to the Planning Commission and approve the ANS otherwise. I know that one of the planning commissioners went through the plan development to show why everything had already been taken care of with the PD, but that's not, I don't think that's necessarily true. Paragraph 6 of the PD says that the landscape plans shall be reviewed and approved with the ANS application. And PD paragraph 7 states that, yes, you can have fencing except as necessary to provide security. I think that is an issue that is to be determined by the trier of fact. So for those reasons, I'm not supporting the motion. Further discussion? Seeing none?
No.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Madam Mayor, yeah.
Mr. Brzezinski.
I would like to supplement my comments with just a very simple acknowledgement of fact that that the approval of the plan development and the facts noted in that approval, that is the findings at that approval point, and also those specifics noted for the ANS approval at the time of the original decision of the council should be entered into record as still extant in this particular case.
Further discussion? Mr. Glickman.
Madam Mayor, thank you very much. There is another issue that I do want to raise because we're talking about our purview of the Planning Commission and on this particular issue. And before we take the vote, I did want to touch on a couple of things that of concern to me and certainly of concern to a number of the speakers tonight and of concern to some folks who have brought the issue to my attention. There's a difference, and let me start out by saying that there's a presumption that all of the people involved acted in good faith, and there needs to be some fairly significant evidence for that not to be the case, so that's a presumption we'll go with. The other is that we're not mind readers. People can watch a hearing and say, oh, you know, I think that person already had their mind made up. Maybe they did, maybe they didn't, we'll never know. So I will say to the folks who raise that concern, I don't see where we can go with that because we don't know. But another issue was raised during the discussion, was raised again tonight, of under what circumstances it's appropriate for either a planning commission or a council member to recuse themselves. The issue was raised at the first planning commission hearing. It was raised again by the chair, and then certain facts have come up which lead to some concern there. In fairness to the public, and again, please, I'm not making any kind of suggestion or accusation, but merely observing that when these issues arise, that everyone involved has the right to a fair hearing and to have the facts looked at. And in the process of developing our new code of conduct, we came up with a process for that. To the extent that there have been some questions raised about whether and under what circumstances perhaps some of the planning commissioners should or shouldn't have recused themselves, I do think that it's fair to everyone concerned that we at least implement the process we adopted and do such investigation as will clear the air. And certainly I hope the outcome of that will be that there was no case where that should have happened. But since it's been raised and we do have a process for it, I am suggesting that because certain things occurred, and then there's no question that they did, they were mentioned in the newspaper, that we make use of the process we adopted.
Further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? No. Passes 3-2, Wasserman and Spector voting no. And that is the end of this agenda item. We are now at other business. There is no other business. We are go to pooled consent items. We have one pooled consent item, number 4. Pulled by Citizen Ray, approve the council study session minutes of August 25th, 2008.
I figured, well, it's okay, I figured close enough for government work. I know what you're doing.
All right, Citizen Ray, you have 3 minutes.
Let me wait till
I can always hear you.
I can't hear myself. Hey.
All right, why don't you restart it? Go ahead. We can hear you.
Yes. I want to speak to the subject at hand, the matter of North 40 study session, okay? Come Tuesday or Wednesday of last week, I couldn't believe it when I found out there was a study session on Monday. Couldn't believe it. So I went back and double-checked. And our person here, Whitewash Jackie, had filed the notice of intent to meet midday Friday. Midday Friday. That's what it said. Midday Friday, okay? So who in God's name is out there Friday afternoon looking at the bulletin board, or over the weekend, or on Monday, okay? So did anybody from the public show up? Of course not, because the public was totally kept in the dark, because there wasn't adequate and appropriate notice, all right? And the big complaint is nobody from the public was there to represent the kids, sports, recreation, okay? And our so-called planning director, this character Lortz, minimized, marginalized the concept of any recreation on the North 40 site. This is what I got from reading the so-called minutes, okay? So I want to tell you, we, the sports community for children, are upset because you didn't take the time to let anybody know what was going on, okay? And shame on you. Don't do it again if you like any kind of respect for your actions, okay? We, the people of Los Gatos, who care about kids, want to participate in the North 40 planning. And this Lortz character be damned, okay? So I want to go on record to that effect. And if we have to call the FBI to ask for an event, which we did in Orinda, under similar circumstances that we have here, we will. We'll find out, like Deep Throat said in Watergate, follow the money. That's what we need to do, in my estimation, okay? We need to follow the money in Los Gatos.
Thank you. No other cards on this item. Do I have a motion?
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Przinski, seconded by Mr. Wasserman to approve the minutes. Discussion? Hearing none. Oh, Mr. Wasserman.
Thank you. I just wanted to point out at the aforementioned meeting, there were about 15 to 20 people from the public, and the council did raise the issue and the concern regarding sports fields as it being a consideration when the North 40 is being discussed. So your council is watching out for your kids.
Further discussion? Now hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Passes unanimously. Council matters. Seeing none. Manager matters.
Madam Mayor, members of the council, 3 quick items. First, regarding the North 40 council study session, it was mentioned at least one council meeting, if not 2, of the date that was planned for that meeting, and there was media coverage by the 2 local media outlets following the North 40 meeting, so the public was aware of that. Second item I wanted to report is, as you may have read in the press yesterday, and it will be in the newspaper tomorrow, I've been checking the headlines as the night has been unfolding. The legislature does appear to be adopting a budget tonight for the state of California. It may be vetoed by the governor, but it takes a two-thirds vote to adopt a budget, so legislative leaders are confident they will be able to override the veto if the governor does indeed veto it. What's relevant is its impact on the town of Los Gatos. It appears that general tax revenues, called Proposition 1A, and transportation revenues are protected. However, redevelopment dollars are part of the budget deal. No language has yet been reviewed by our representatives in Sacramento, but it appears that the package includes a one-time take of up to $600,000 from the town of Los Gatos instead of the $300,000 take over 3 years, each of 3 years. So the risk we face is next year they do 600 again, and then it becomes a doubling of what was planned. But right now, the action, to the best of our information, is a $600,000 one-time take of redevelopment tax increment, and we'll learn more over the next couple of days. Madam Mayor, I have a question on that item, and I have one last quick one when we're done.
All right, let's stick to questions on the RDA thing. Mr. Glickman?
That was the question. It's my understanding that this proposed library project is dependent on that RDA funding. So could you tell us what the impact of, let's assume that we lose the $600K this year, potentially lose another $600 next year, where does that leave the project?
It's premature to make that judgment until we see what protections are provided for funds that are already appropriated, as ours are. The council approved the appropriation of tax increment last June as part of the budget adoption. I'm fairly confident that a one-time hit of $600,000 does not negatively impact the library project. However, if there to be any ongoing hit indefinitely into the future of $600,000 from any pot of money, I think we'd be coming back to the council for budget review, be it capital projects, operating services, you name it, and that would ultimately be a council action. So right now, I can't speculate that there's anything that would negatively hurt the library project.
Mr. Wasserman?
Thank you. The one-time hit that you're referring to from your sources on the motion being decided and discussed up in Sacramento, you say hit, so it doesn't sound like that's a loan to be paid back. It's a one-time take?
Correct. It would be a one-time take of redevelopment funds through what's called an ERAF shift. So before the money even comes to the town, it would be taken out by the county. For the city of San Jose, it's estimated to be a $17 million one-time hit to them.
So what's being proposed is what money that was promised to us may be taken by the state, taken, not borrowed, because of their financial shortfall.
Correct.
So if anybody wants to call up Sacramento and complain about that, it'd be a good time to do that now?
Yeah.
Okay, that's a good idea. Thank you.
Tonight, as they continue to meet, in terms of Councilman Glickman's issue, we are not planning any debt issuance till a later fiscal year, so this take does not affect any likely debt issuance. Now, if there were to be a second, third, fourth year hit, we would have to factor that in to any bond issuance for the library project or other purposes. But there's no action pending on that, to the best of our knowledge. Who knows what tomorrow will bring. Third item is we heard a little bit about the Kennedy Road issue and traffic safety. I did want to let the council know that we had Public Works and traffic and street and police staff at the neighborhood meeting last week, and tomorrow our Director of Parks and Public Works is actually doing a neighborhood walk with kids going to school to see what the real-life impact is with the morning commute. So that concludes the staff report.
Thank you, and I want to thank everybody who spoke and was here this evening, and the council for handling a difficult, challenging issue very well and very professionally. Thank you, and the meeting is adjourned.